Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for Fight Night Picks with your hosts, Craig and Matt Allen.
Coming up this weekend, big time fight card. It's the Ultimate Fighter Season 30 finale, and we also have Thiago Santos taking on Jamahal Hill in the main event. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen, on the socials, Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. Now, Matt, people are always trying to figure out what our names are. They're trying to figure out if we're brothers. They have so many different questions. I hope we've answered them to start off the show.
It's weird that they still have these questions. He's Craig. I'm Matt. We're the Allen brothers. We're like the Buffer brothers, but instead of being like, generational voices, we talk about MMA on the internet. So it's kind of the same, but not really the same. Hopefully that helps clear anything up.
Well, listen, it was a big-time card last weekend. UFC 277, we both ended up at 10-3, hitting it out of the park. Amanda Nunes getting her belt back against Juliana Pena. Now the awkward follow-up to that, because it used to always be International Fight Week, the coaches fight at some point. You have the series finale during the week, a Wednesday night, a Thursday night, a Friday night. But ultimately, a week later, we end up with the heavyweights battling it out. Muhammad Usman, younger brother of Kamaru, taking on Zach Pauga. And then at flyweight, we have an interesting fight between Juliana Killer Miller taking on the Brogy. Well, I'd say the Brogy Bear, but it's Brogy the Bear, Brogan Walker. So an interesting fight there. Jeff Neal taking on Vicente Luque in the co-main event. We have some slimmer pickings on the prelims. We have an Ultimate Fighter winner in Bryan Battle dropping down to 170, taking on Takashi Sato. But overall, I know there's a lot of fights that might fly under the radar, fights that you might not be interested on. We're going to punch up. We're going to have some fun with this one.
We are. There's some fights that are definitely don't have the notoriety that they deserve. I know Cory, McKenna, Miranda, Granger is kind of a fun one. It feels like there's a lot of get back on the horse fights this weekend, where it's like, hey, this fighter had a lot of hype behind them. Let's see if they can still live up to it. Like even Terrance McKinney versus Erick Gonzalez. Terrance McKinney, of course, had that crazy one-round fight of the night against Drew Dober, and I think we all know just how darn tough Drew Dober is.
Didn't win the bonus, deserved it.
Exactly. And now he's going up against Erick Gonzalez, a guy who, let's be honest, Terrance McKinney's probably expected to win, but that's still an exciting fight at 155 pounds for sure.
So many good ones to look forward to. There's only 12 fights on this card, so we're going with the Fight Night Picks fight of the night. You got to pick two. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. We'll throw it on over to the Fight of the Night screen.
Let us know down below in the comment section who you've got. It's time for the Fight of the Night with Fight Night Picks.
Matt, listen, I make this show, and I usually like to go with hipster picks for these friggin' things, but you know what? I'm not. This week, we're just throwing that out the window because there are some fun fights on the prelims. They feel like they should be fairly easy to pick and predict. Now, you say something like that, and then you go 2-12 or 2-10 on a 12-fight card, and you look like an absolute donkey. But when it comes to the Fight of the Night picks, Jeff Neal taking on Vicente Luque. I go down through it. Vicente Luque has 4 Fight of the Nights, 4 performance bonuses. For Jeff Neal, only 1 performance bonus to his name, the win over Nico Price. And for Nico Price, just don't watch this fight. He's lost to both these guys, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun while it lasts. And these two guys, again, ranked fighters at welterweight. This should be a fun one.
And it feels like these two guys have been on a crash course for years now. Because for the longest time, Jeff Neal and Vicente Luque were both trying to make their way into the top 15, but sort of on their own path. They were fighting different opponents. They were beating good opponents. But at a certain point, both guys' hype have sort of stalled out. So I think this fight against each other is a very fun one. Because again, in this stacked welterweight division, only one person's going to be able to get to the top and probably get to fight Kamaru Usman. Because Leon Edwards, Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington, you don't need me to list all the other contenders in this division. So I think this is a very fun fight to figure out who really is the best striker out of these two, because for a little while Jeff Neal and Vicente Luque were both seen as sort of the next evolution of Wonder Boy. Now Wonder Boy's probably watching this fight and being like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good about myself right now, but I think this is an incredible Striker's Paradise type of a fight.
Should be a fun one. I mean, we flip it on over to our second pick, and you hate the cherry pick again, but Thiago Santos has been in main event after main event after main event. Obviously had that wild title fight. We're kind of still resting on the laurels of that one, if we're all being honest with each other, against John Jones. But for Santos last time out, dropped Magomed Ankalaev in the second round. Lost the first round, the third round, the fourth round, the fifth round, but we can gloss over all of that. He's taking on Jamahal Hill, a guy who has a no contest against Khalil Roundtree due to clomiphene. And then he also has a loss to Paul Craig, where he wanted to play touch putt in the park on the ground, and he got burned. But other than that, Jamahal Hill's been a hell of an impressive prospect. 10-1 with a no contest is the record, and he obviously gets a big opportunity in this fight. And a guy who, once you get that star shine, I mean, hey, it's hard to deny this guy a shot against some of the divisional elite.
Now, let's think about Jamahal Hill. He's been a very high-level prospect, but this is the fight that gets him into a contender. Because if you beat a guy like Thiago Santos, I know he might not be prime Maheta at this point of his career, but that is still a great win to have on your resume. It's like when Joe Rogan was talking about how good of a win Alex Morono had when he beat Cowboy Cerrone. At the time, Cowboy wasn't really Cowboy, but still, I think if Jamahal Hill is able to get a win over Santos, it might not get him in line for a title shot next, but he is going to have to fight the likes of a Rakic or a Blachowicz or maybe even an Ankalaev, so I think it puts either guy, whoever the winner is, in a great position to, again, not fight for the title next, but at least be one half a title eliminator fight.
Jamahal Hill highlights are against the lesser ranked and lesser known of this division. For Thiago Santos, the fight that the UFC decided to throw out there on a Monday as we tape this, was his fight against Anthony Smith at 185 pounds. A great win, but it was a long time ago. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in a fight of the night. I think Bryan battle Takashi Sato is going to be fun. Jason Witt, Josh Quinlan in his debut should be another good one. There's 12 total fights. You toss it down there. You're not wrong till Saturday night. And if you're right, you can come back and gloat if you'd like. Big time fights coming up this weekend. So 12 total fights coming up on the card. You have the two Ultimate Fighter finales, Pauga taking on Usman and Miller taking on Walker. And if you look at it for ranked opponents on this card, Thiago Santos at 6, Jamahal Hill at 10, Vicente Luque at, where is he? Where are we coming in at? Number 6. You have Jeff Neal at 13. And then we also have Augusto Sakai at 14. Take on the unranked Sergey Spivak, who's coming off a big finish win over Greg Hardy. The see you later, get out of the UFC over to bare knuckle. We have the UFC debut of Josh Quinlan, who got a win on Contender Series last year against a short notice opponent. You also have Bryan Battle dropping down for the first time in his career at 170 pounds, take on Takashi Sato. Fun fights throughout. Ranked fighters, former ranked fighters duking it out. This should be an interesting card coming up this weekend.
It's a smiling Sam Alvey fight week, guys. Let's get excited.
UFC Rochester Watch fans are from Twitter. You know they are, right?
They'd be about the only group of people.
It is one of those cards. We're going to make this one a fun one. If you're not amped for these fights, get amped. Check it out at Fight Night Picks, Instagram, Twitter. Again, you can find us, Craig Allen, Matt Allen, on their respective socials. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Thank you so much for tuning in with Fight Night Picks. I'm going to tell you this. There's only a handful of unranked women's bantamweights that exist on the face of this planet. And coming up this weekend, you have a couple of them duking it out. It's Buddy Jim MMA's own Stephanie Egger. Now, she's training out of Soma Fight Club in the warmer regions of the world, getting set for this fight. And I hope she's working on her striking against Shitara Mayra Bueno Silva, somebody who's been training in Southern California at Combat Sports Academy. And if you know anything about that gym, that's where Jessica Rose Clark trains, somebody who lost to Stephanie Egger last time out. And this is one of those fights where I can kind of go back and forth between these two athletes, but it is a little bit of a tough one to cap because if you know anything about Stephanie Egger, 2019 ADCC European champ, she's a black belt in judo, and when you look at it, she ended up facing off against Gabby Garcia at Worlds that year at the entire, the finale of the ADCCs. Went to a decision against her. That's impressive in its own right. But when you look at her fights, I mean, very much strike to clinch, clinch to get the takedown, takedown to submit you. That's pretty much the crux of Stephanie Egger's game. Now, she came into the UFC on relative short notice, took on Tracy Cortez, didn't get the win there. Got kind of grounded out in terms of the wrestling. Didn't look all that great in that fight. And I know, Matt, I hate to take words out of your mouth and I hate to speak for you, so I'll let you right after this. For you, I know you were super down on Egger with that one performance, and has that kind of soured your kind of outlook on Stephanie Egger kind of in her overall UFC run?
No, not at all. Both things can be true, and that's something that no one likes to hear this, but it is the truth. Egger has looked good since her loss, but she still looked terrible in her loss. Like, you can't just completely gloss over the fact that Tracy Cortez, someone who doesn't have great striking, someone who has good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, kind of steamrolled Stephanie Egger when it came to the grappling aspect of the fight. Now, I can admit, Stephanie Egger has looked a lot better ever since that fight, but that does worry me with her whole style. She is very one-dimensional, and I think this fight against Bueno Silva is going to be a very fun one, because, like you said, I hope Egger has been working on her striking, because Bueno Silva, we all know how good her grappling is, but she does choose to strike in a lot of her fights, and especially as of late. We all know her for her aggressive boxing combinations. She will move forward a lot with her strikes, but I think that's going to be an area that she's almost going to have to find her own Goldilocks zone, because let's say she is too aggressive with her strikes. That's going to help Stephanie Egger initiate a lot of those clinches, go for some takedowns of her own. But if Silva can stay on the outside and pitter-patter, maybe go a little bit more away from just sitting down on her power shots like she likes to do a little bit too much, because that's the thing. Bueno Silva, if you just watch the silhouette of her, you'd think she's John Lineker half the time. The difference is, she doesn't have the crippling power of a John Lineker, so sometimes her style of sitting down on her power punches does worry me against anybody who could pitter-patter from the outside or use it against her.
John Lineker is a bit of a weird guy because, I mean, he's short for the division, whether that's bantamweight or flyweight, but he's got a really long, wide stance, and he really likes to sit down. With Mayra Bueno Silva, she stands a little bit taller. She's got a Muay Thai stance, flat on her feet, but she does throw a lot of hooks, like you said. I mean, she's very, very heavy with her shots, and when I look at Mayra Bueno Silva, to lend credence to that, I mean, she's got a negative 0.75 strike differential. She throws 4.25 significant strikes per minute to the negative 4.98. So it is above the UFC average of 3.38. And when you do look at Mayra Bueno Silva and you just watch her fight, look at the Wu Yanan fight. That was a fight in the night, her last time out there. It was the move back up to bantamweight. If you watch Mayra Bueno Silva, she had a lot of experience at bantamweight coming into the UFC. She won on Dana White's Contender Series Brazil at bantamweight, drops down to flyweight, gets a fight against Jillian Robertson, and we're going to talk about Jillian Robertson quite a bit this week, and she will feature quite prominently, but she gets a win over her by submission. She beats Mauro Barella by submission as well, loses to Marina Moroz, gets outstruck in that fight, loses to Manon Fiorot, gets outstruck in that fight, has the draw against Montana De La Rosa. This is the weird thing for Bueno Silva. Just got her brown belt a week ago, and I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due to her coach that gave that one out, because it definitely is important. It's Thiago Gaia. That was who gave the belt out, so credit to him. But when I do watch her fights, struggles against good wrestler grapplers, beats grapplers though. Like, it is a weird one for Bueno Silva so far in the UFC.
And that's what's strange about this matchup. Egger is a good grappler, but not a good traditional wrestler. And I do feel like Bueno Silva's weakness in her style is defending some of those more traditional takedown attempts, because she is very strong with her upper body. She is very good in the clinch herself. She can land great knees, great elbows, and a Thai clinch does translate into an MMA clinch. It does help you with some of these judo practitioners who are going to look for the takedown from that spot. So I do think Bueno Silva's weaknesses are more tied to a more traditional style of a wrestler, like a Montana De La Rosa, than a Stephanie Egger, who will try to wrap up the arms a lot more. And that's why I think there's a world where this fight isn't great to watch, and I think there's a world where this fight is phenomenal to watch. Because if Stephanie Egger does go in there just trying to do a lot of clinch work, going for a lot of takedowns off of the clinch, I do think she's going to struggle with some of those. But I think this could be one of those cases where she goes 2 for 11 in her takedown attempts, but the second one might be the only one she needs to secure the submission, because that's the thing about these two women. I think Stephanie Egger, frame-wise, is going to be quite a bit bigger than Mayra Bueno Silva. I know right there on Tapology, it has them listed very similar, but I think Egger is the taller, thinner fighter, and I do think that her range is going to be a key factor in this fight, because if Bueno Silva can never get close to her, it's going to be really hard for her to damage her on the feet, and I really do think that's going to be her key to getting the win.
I'm really eager to see what Egger is able to add in terms of tools to her skill set from training at a new gym for a few weeks or a few months just to get ready for this matchup, because Bueno Silva, definitely the more adept on the feet. When you watch Stephanie Egger fight, she paws her right hand, she throws a right to then kind of try and grab like it's a hockey fight, and then she puts her left arm out, pulls your fighter in, grabs the clinch, and then from there tries to go for her judo takedowns, and that's pretty much her game. She'll throw a bit of a leg kick, but it doesn't really set a whole lot up. It's just to kind of keep that distance figured out. Whereas for Mayra Bueno Silva, constantly throwing, constantly in motion. Bueno Silva will throw a lot of leg kicks in the first round and then get away from it in the second. Maybe pick it up a little bit in the third round, but she does like to soften her opponent up in the first to then set up her big power shot. She had Wu Yanan dropped in the first round. They didn't count it as a knockdown. She doesn't typically have a lot of knockdowns in her fights. We have a look at the odds in this one, and Bueno Silva open a -130, -116 as it stands. For Stephanie Egger, open to +110, -104. We have a look at the Tapology vote, Matt. Surprise to us there, to you. Bueno Silva's done it in the UFC. Now, both these women, similar records in the UFC, as you might surprised. But for Egger, 2-fight win streak. Bueno Silva won her last one, back up at bantamweight. I'm going to say over-under 65% Bueno Silva.
I'll say under. I think it'll be close to 50.
Oh my goodness. 1,001 total votes. 67%
right,
Stephanie Egger to get the win. 78% by decision. For the 33% that have Bueno Silva to win, 82% by decision. For Egger, it should be noted, the 2 wins in the UFC. One over Shanna Young. Young brought it to her in the first round, was going for a lot of leg locks, wasn't able to get it. Second round, Egger took over, got her in a mounted crucifix, wins that fight. Jessica Rose Clark, before that fight, I said, hey, I think
screaming into my ear.
I think she'll win if she boxes, but if she tries to take her down, she's going to lose. And she went in there with wrestling shoes on, and Egger was able to get takedowns. Egger wins by submission. So in this matchup, can Egger get the win? Could she get it to the mat? We're going to find out.
This fight reminds me of that Mythbusters episode where they try to figure out what's worse to get stepped on. An elephant, or an elephant's foot, or a stiletto, like the end of a high, or what are they called?
Like
a high heel. Thank you, I couldn't think of the word. Now, what happens is, a high heel is concentrated on one point, so it hurts really bad on that one point and everything's concentrated there, whereas an elephant's foot is flat, so it's spread out. Mayra Bueno Silva's chance to win this fight is spread out like an elephant's foot. It might be a little bit better, but I don't think she has any one area that she's going to excel at as much as Stephanie Egger can, with her stiletto point, if you will, being her jiu-jitsu and her grappling. I do think Bueno Silva has a much better chance to win this fight by decision, for the reasons you said. She is the much better striker, but that's the weird thing about Bueno Silva and her striking. I think her aggression is going to be the X factor in this fight, because like I said, if she's over-aggressive, then she's just going to go into some of those clinch exchanges that we know Stephanie Egger is more than going to welcome. So I'm ever so slightly going to pick Bueno Silva just because I think she can excel in a few different areas, whereas Egger's one area is going to have to be so overwhelmingly strong for her to get the win. But I think this is a fun fight, and I'm surprised to see where the Tapology votes are. I'm surprised that so many people on Tapology are favoring Egger in this match.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, almost 3 years ago, Stephanie Egger went over to Rise and took on their King Reina, and was able to get a decision win over there. But I was excited about Egger coming into the UFC based on the grappling credentials so far. Obviously, Shanna Young rallies back in that fight. She's able to get the win against Jessica Rose Clark. That's a big name of ex-MMA commentary fame.
A big name of a woman who hadn't won in a while, though.
No, she was on a win
streak. I know, but Jessica Rose Clark isn't still looked at as like a top contender how she used to be. Like, Jessica Rose Clark at one point was like a 10-7 fighter.
Well, in this fight, I like Mayra Bueno Silva, and I gotta go back to something that I went away from a little bit last week. I said in the Alex Morono, Matt Semmelsberger prediction, it was Alex Morono's better in just about every single area. Usually I pick these fighters, but Matt Semmelsberger's a little bit bigger and he hits a little bit harder. And boy, was I wrong when I said that I'm going with Semmelsberger for that reason. So I bring it back in, reel in the bass, and I go with Mayra Bueno Silva. She has more of those skills that should be able to get her a win in this matchup. I like the combinations. Egger does not throw much output on the feet. It is a lot of, I throw a jab, that right hand to grab, to then pull you in to hit you with the left to try and clinch and initiate that way. So for the reasons there, I like Mayra Bueno Silva in this matchup. I'm really eager to see what people are saying about this fight because the odds have Bueno Silva. They're closing in on Egger. The fans overwhelmingly have Stephanie Egger to get the win. So let us know down below in the comment section. If you're listening in the car or on the airplane, wait. And then once you're stopped and it's safe, let us know over there on the podcast.
How many pilots are listening to us stopping on the tarmac and then turning the podcast back on?
There's one pilot. There's about 200 people on the plane. I hope all 200 are listening to the show.
They're not driving, that's all.
Then the people that are driving in the car that are listening. Do you understand how podcasts work?
You just put the two together, so it was wild to think that some pilot out there is listening to us, taking off, and then he's like, I can't listen to the boys at Fight Night Picks. Let me land again.
Galaxy Brain. Matt, it should be a fun week. We have the Ultimate Fighter 30 finale, flyweight, heavyweight, and then, of course, Thiago Santos and Jamahal Hill in the main event. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Coming up this weekend at strawweight, Cory McKenna's fought to two really weird decisions in the UFC. She's still only 23 years old, having turned that age just a few weeks ago. She's going to be taking on Miranda Granger, somebody who hasn't fought in forever. And for Granger, a great opportunity to get back into the good graces with a win. And if you look at it for Miranda Granger, comes into the UFC. She's a former CFFC strawweight champ, an organization that has produced such women's champions as Katlyn Chookagian. So for Granger, she was getting it done. She was undefeated. She beats Hannah Goldie. She outstruck the striker. She beat her in different positions. And then she picked up a couple of different losses. Now, not all losses are created equal, but she goes out there, loses a first-round submission to Amanda Lemos, which is going to happen. Lemos, one of the best women in this division. But then for Granger, goes out and fights Ashley Yoder. And I'd say not all decision wins are created equal when I talk about Cory McKenna. But Matt, Ashley Yoder 10-8'd Miranda Granger in the third round of that fight. And it wasn't a good lasting impression for somebody who's gone on, since had a pregnancy, had a kid, now she's getting back into MMA. That fight against Ashley Yoder about a year and 8 months ago. And for Granger, I know it's one of those ones you got to kind of throw it out and forget about some of those losses, but they still do kind of give you a bad taste.
Why do you have to throw them out? Those are the last two times we saw her.
You got to at least think of the good times.
I'm going to disagree with that point. I don't know how you can forget about the bad times. Like you said, we saw her get 10-8'd by a fighter whose best game plan is fight to a split decision. That's the really big problem with Miranda Granger. What is her one X factor that stands out above an average fighter in this division?
Her jiu-jitsu.
But even her jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't say can get it done against even the top 10 grapplers in this division. Problem with Miranda Granger is she really needs a specific area for her fights to have a lot of success in. She needs a lot of clinch trips. She needs a lot of top control. She needs a lot of ground and pound. Do any of those three things tend to normally work on a fighter like Cory McKenna? I would say no. And that's the weird thing about Miranda Granger. We got asked the question, I don't know if it was on Question Mark Kicks or if it was during the fight companion, so I apologize, but someone had asked us what our early thoughts are on Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev, because I feel like that's the next big fight, you know what I mean? Like, that's sort of the next big fight on the horizon that even the casual fans can get very excited for. I think Miranda Granger at this division is going to have the same problem that Charles Oliveira is going to have in that matchup. She's just not the most physically strong fighter in this division, and I do think that makes her really struggle against these takedown heavy fighters like Cory McKenna is probably going to bring into this fight. And when we were just giving our sort of, initial thoughts on this card going up and down, I said that on this card, it does feel like there's a few of these get back on the horse fights, and I really do feel that way with Cory McKenna in this matchup. It does feel like the UFC's been trying to build her star ever since the Contender Series win. She is very young, which is always something they like to do. They always like to have like 5 people between the age of 20 and 23 on the roster, just in case they turn into something the UFC can be like, hey, we've had them the whole time. But at least Cory McKenna does have some attributes that I feel put her above just the average fighter in this division. She has pretty good cardio. She can take a heck of a shot in the feet, which isn't a great thing to be known for when you've been getting hit clean at the age of 23, but still has shown a very good chin up until this point. And I do like her relentlessness with her own takedowns. Again, she's not someone who has this extended background like a Chael Sonnen or somebody, but her MMA wrestling is quite high level against other people who can grapple in the UFC.
It's good, and I started this one off saying not all wins are created equal because she beats Vanessa Demopoulos on Contender Series, gets the contract. It's one of those, you're young, we need you, like you said, so we're going to sign you to this division. She takes on Kay Hansen. I mean, all 3 judges scored the contest 29-28. They gave her round 1, they gave her round 2. MMA decisions, 3 gave it 30-27 Hansen, 11 gave it 29-28 Hansen, 2 gave it 29-28 McKenna. McKenna gets the win by unanimous decision. Then she goes out. It was a London card back in March. The Tom Aspinall-Volkov one. And she takes on Elise Reed. Elise Reed of striking fame. She's a Taekwondo black belt. Cory McKenna of grappler at Team Alpha Male. Now, it's weird how 2 of Wales' best prospects go to Team Alpha Male in McKenna and Mason Jones. But for McKenna, she fights Elise Reed. She gets a few takedowns. She gets punished on the feet. In that, Derek Cleary gave 30-27 McKenna. Most people had it all for Elise Reed. The other 2 judges did as well. I thought Elise Reed did a lot to win that fight, but McKenna gets the takedowns, but she did get punished on the feet in this matchup against a fighter in Miranda Granger, who's on the comeback. She's been off since November 14th of 2020, back when the top song in the Billboard charts was
Blinding Lights,
boy.
I'm assuming?
I thought it was Blinding Lights, Matt.
Yeah.
It was mooed by 24K Golden, which has almost 375 million views.
Fucking around acting brand new.
I
tried to tell you what to do. You don't know that song?
I didn't know that song until I heard it, and I went, oh, I know that from, like, the internet. But I didn't really know that song. They just look like two guys.
I think it's on 2K.
They look like two guys that would have one song, and then you never hear about them again. Like the Milli Vanilli of 2020. But looking at this one, Matt, Miranda Granger has 4 inches of height and 9.5 inches of reach. Cory McKenna is going to look to try and pounce on that. Poppin's pouncing with the P's in the microphone. Matt, we have a look at the odds in this one. McKenna open to -210, -215. Granger open a +180, +175. We have a look at the Topology votes. Surprise to us, it is to you. I'm going to say over under 82.5% McKenna.
I was going to say above 80, so yeah, around there.
Oh boy, look at that. 1,001 total votes, 83% McKenna, 17% Granger, 90% have McKenna to win by decision, 82% have Granger to win by decision of the 17% that have Granger. So Matt, the odds are against Miranda Granger. The fans are against Miranda Granger. You have Cory McKenna to win this fight.
Of course I do. She's fighting someone who hasn't looked very good in her last 2 fights. Who's coming off a 2-year layoff. I find it very difficult to pick Miranda Granger in this matchup. Again, the wrestling of Cory McKenna is something that has yet to be completely deterred in the UFC. Elise Reed had a massive size advantage over her and a really nice striking background, so she was able to brutalize Cory McKenna in those striking exchanges.
How did she have a massive size advantage?
She had fought at bantamweight before. She had fought at flyweight before.
She'd fought at flyweight on short notice. She was a strawweight.
Okay, my point is, she is a big fighter for this division, and the fact that Cory McKenna got outstruck by her does not mean that Miranda Granger's going to be able to go out there and do the same thing. I think Granger's going to try to play a lot of her jiu-jitsu off her back, which is going to help the game plan of Cory McKenna, because McKenna doesn't have to be crazy active from her guard or her half guard. I just think the top position is going to be enough to get enough minutes, enough moments, enough just time in the judges' minds so that she'll be able to win rounds that way, because neither fighter has fight-ending power with her punches. Neither fighter is that high level of a submission specialist, so I really do think this fight's more than likely going to go to decision, and if that is the case, I do favor the person with the wrestling advantage.
The reason why I like the underdog in this matchup, again, height and reach are never created equal. You look at somebody with this off the page, there's going to be somebody that comments under this and says, well, geez, 9.5 inches of reach, well, I have to pick that fighter. It's not that she's this great, long, prodding striker that can keep you at bay. The trouble I have with it, and you mentioned it and I did too, is the fact that Cory McKenna does absorb a lot of shots. Her striking defense isn't the best. Her wrestling is her X factor, but once it's down to the mat, it's kind of top position over everything. And I don't necessarily love that. Now, pounding back the minutes is a way to win it in the eyes of the judges, and we even saw that for Derek Cleary in the fight that she had against Elise Reed. But for me, I like Miranda Granger having more skills to be able to win the fight. So I'll be eager to see which one of these two is able to get the win. Obviously, the fans, the odds with Cory McKenna. You have Cory McKenna. I can obviously see that giant wrestling advantage, and Miranda Granger is somebody that likes to play jiu-jitsu off her back. We'll see how this fight plays out. I'm going based on the previous fights up until the last 2, and you're going off of Cory McKenna and the body of work that we've seen.
You're going off fights from 3.5 years ago?
Matt, I don't care. I'm picking Miranda Granger to win this
No,
fight.
that's fine. I'm just asking what the reasoning is. That's all.
She has better jiu-jitsu. She's a better striker.
Okay.
She's more well-rounded. You have the wrestling advantage of Cory McKenna. We disagree on the pick. It's allowed. But let us know down below in the comments section who you have. We have a big-time fight card set up with the 2 finales at The Ultimate Fighter. At heavyweight, at flyweight, and in the main event, Thiago Santos, Jamahal Hill. I can't wait for it. Be sure to hit up the comments section. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Coming up this weekend at welterweight, we have the Vanilla Gorilla, Jason Witt, taking on the Maverick, Josh Quinlan. And in this matchup for Jason Witt, he's on a little bit of one of those Charles Rosa, Random Marcos type of, runs. And you hate to see it, but alternating wins and losses throughout his UFC career, comes in on a day's notice to take on Takashi Sato, and promptly tries to go for a takedown and gets knocked out off of that in under a minute. So it has been a little bit of a wild ride. Obviously, his best career win, the big-time one, it was a fight of the night over Bryan Barberena. He also has a win where he absolutely grounded Cole Williams. The other losses on his record, 1-2, it's a tricky one. I mean, he's taken on Matt Semmelsberg. He gets knocked down in, 20 seconds?
Yeah, it was
less
tough.
than 20 seconds. Loses to Phil Rowe, where he has good success in the first round, and ultimately Rowe finds his Goldilocks zone and his comfort in the second. But for Jason Witt, it's kind of been so-so. Now, obviously, he's coached by now championship caliber coach James Krause, a guy who said on the MMA Hour that you're probably not going to see him fight again.
He retired. Congrats to James Krause.
Yeah, he is a full-time coach, but he has Brandon Moreno in the stable of stars. Yes, they can hit. So for Jason Witt, a good opportunity coming up against Josh Quinlan, a guy who has looked like a banshee, a man possessed, a great undercard fight that we do have on this one. But he got the win on Dana White's Contender Series against Logan Urban week 2 of last year. Finished him very, very quickly. For Quinlan, a great level of competition on the way up. Wins over with LFA, Dallas Jennings, Joe Borshig. He gets a win over Pete Keepers, one where, listen, was Pete making his pro debut? Yes. Did Pete get put on baby deer legs in the second round of that fight and just completely grounded out? Yes, he did. But for Josh Quinlan, an absolutely fun fighter to watch. A lot of finishes throughout his overall record. Really high, not tie stance, really high boxing stance, and he throws great combinations. All the power in the world in every single one of his shots that you love to see. Now, Matt, I gotta say this because the win on Contender Series, it was great. It was then overturned. Dana White was very, very excited about that one. But yeah, that one overturned due to Drew Stanalone by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. He's had a long time off from that until this fight, but a good opportunity against a guy who has 5 UFC fights under his belt.
It definitely is, but I gotta be honest, Jason Witt's like a +2 to 1 underdog just about. It's like, that's a dangerous UFC debut for anybody. If I was making my UFC debut, I wouldn't want to fight a guy like Jason Witt, who has a good wrestling background. Now, I know we all know what the obvious weaknesses are with Jason Witt's game. He has decent power on his hands, let's acknowledge that first of all. Is he the most durable guy in the world? Not necessarily. But still, when you look at his positives, I do think that's a difficult fight for anybody to make in their debut because he offers very obvious challenges, and it means that you as the prospect not only have to show a skill set to be able to deal with those challenges, you're going to have to be able to think the game too, because if you just go in there and try to fight Jason Witt in his fight, throw some boxing combinations with him, try to defend a few of his takedowns, that's when he's going to seem a lot better than he probably is, and that's the weird thing about Jason Witt. He reminds me of like a Yuta Watanabe for the Raptors. If he just comes out, hits like 5 threes, and then he won't play a game for like 4 straight weeks because he really isn't that good. Jason Witt, in some of his fights, when he is able to put his whole skill set together, looks like a pretty competent fighter. He can mix his wrestling in with his boxing to a high level. But the problem is, and like you said in the Takashi fight, it really showed his ugly head. He's not good at defending himself when he does go for these initial takedown attempts. I know people are probably rolling their eyes right now because I always bring up this one fighter because he's so good at it. Marvin Vettori is who everyone should watch if they are a pressure-oriented wrestler who does try to strike with volume. And I understand Witt's a little bit more power-oriented, but you get the idea. Witt's big weakness is that when he does go for those takedowns like you showed, he looks like a mummy in Scooby-Doo. He's walking out there with 2 arms as far out as he can, and a striker like Josh Quinlan can sure as heck put him down with one big shot. The real question is, how long does it take for Quinlan to be able to set up that one big punch? Because let's say Josh Quinlan is on the receiving end of some takedowns, he's having to get up, he's using some of that energy, then maybe we could see Jason Witt start to get stronger as this fight goes on. It's just in every Witt fight, like normally you worry about a fighter's durability in the second and the third round. You know, they've eaten some big shots, how are they going to look later on in the fight? I'm as concerned about Jason Witt as I am from the first punch thrown in this fight to the last punch thrown, and that's why it's so hard to make any Jason Witt pick confidently.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Witt, if you want, like, some actual tangible numbers on this one, Jason Witt is 10th all-time in UFC history. All time. Like, think of all the fighters that have been in the UFC. Jason Witt's number 10 out of all of them in top percentage at 49.8%. He's at welterweight, the 3rd all-time at control time percentage with 56.28%. He goes for a ton of takedowns. He holds you down. He grounds you out. And if you want fights like that, the start of the Phil Rowe fight, the Cole Williams fight, where he just absolutely mollywopped him. Like, he is very good at getting his arms around you, locking the hands, getting the double leg, getting the single leg, freestyle wrestling base. When you look at Josh Quinlan, the things that I like about him, again, high boxing stance, good at throwing combinations, good at mixing in his power, good to know when to go to the body. And the things that I kind of picked up on, he's from Kauai in Hawaii, and you look at it for Josh Quinlan, he was a soccer star at Waianae, so you like to see that as he was a kid growing up playing soccer. But you see that out of Quinlan where he does throw these power shots on the feet, but he's smart at when he mixes them in. He does eat a little bit of damage in his fights. He will go give one to take one, but he himself has a pretty darn good chin. But what I like out of it is, first round, second round, as the fight goes on, he's pretty much the same guy throughout, and I love to see that in his fights. Now, he can get tagged, and he does tend to drop his hands a little bit, but I like the fact that he can throw a little bit of a different look from that southpaw stance, and he is a really fun prospect to watch. Now, I look at some guys when they're 6-0, 5-0, like coming in this week, and now you're probably watching this, it's going to be after Dana White's Contender Series, but we have a couple of 5-0 fighters taking each other on, and I look at them as maybe they're not ready for the UFC. I look at Josh Quinlan as a guy that's probably ready for the UFC.
He probably is, but again, Jason Witt's going to be a big test for him in his debut because Witt has some very obvious strengths and very obvious weaknesses. What I hope for this fight is that we don't see a Josh Quinlan win in the first 30 seconds, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Like, I am going to predict him to win this fight. I'll get that out of the way right now, but still, I want to see this fight go into the second round, the third round. See him weighing a few shots on Jason Witt, maybe get taken down a couple times, really test his gas tank and test some of his wrestling, just to see where he does fall into the whole division and where his ceiling potentially could be. Because a win over Jason Witt, it might not set you up for the biggest fights in the future, but you're not going to be fighting other fighters coming off Contender Series or anything like that if you're Quinlan. So let's say he knocks out Jason Witt in the first round. A name that you had brought up earlier on in the show was a Nico Price. Like, Nico Price hasn't looked great for a while, if we're being honest. He has a big name because we all love him for the crazy fights. Like, I think a type of fight like that is someone Josh Quinlan could go in there with and have a really fun fight with.
To me, I'd like to see the rematch of, or at least the rebooking of what was supposed to take place on Dana White's Contender Series last year. Because as I had mentioned, Josh Quinlan was supposed to take on somebody. That somebody was Darian Weeks. Weeks out, Logan Urban in. He knocks out Urban in 48 seconds. And off of that episode, Chad Ann-Helliger gets signed. CJ Vergara gets signed. Simon Oliveira gets signed. Chidi Njokuani. And in the main event, Josh Quinlan gets signed. So we look at the odds in this fight. Witt open to plus 170, plus 178. Josh Quinlan open minus 200, minus 221. And I understand Jason Witt's a decent underdog in this one, but I think there's a lot of respect given just based on the fact that his one big skill set is so good with his wrestling. We have a look at the fan vote. I doubt it's all that close, but it'll be a surprise to us that is you. I'm going to say over under 75% Quinlan.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. It's over. I think you're looking on these every week. I think you're cheating.
I'm not.
You're getting good.
Craig, you guess within 1% half the time. If you think I don't think
I
you're
don't
cheating.
look. 1,010 total votes. 84% Quinlan. 81% have Quinlan to win by knockout. For the 16% that have Jason Witt, 68% by decision. And for Josh Quinlan, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, trains at a Juan Fight Club in Vegas. Yes, that's Wanderlei Silva's gym. One of my favorite fighters when I was a kid. Matt, I think Josh Quinlan gets the win in this fight. Again, it's the poor chin of Jason Witt to the jiu-jitsu, the decent takedown defense out of Josh Quinlan, but it's the power, the speed, and the boxing he possesses, and that's why I have Quinlan to win this fight over Witt.
I agree with everything you said, and the last point that I'd like to make is I like when fighters Josh Quinlan's age have this many fights. I know he's 29 years old, and people might look at that as, hey, he's later on in his career. Let's be honest, in MMA, your prime's like from 28 until 34. In most sports, it's your early 20s because you want to capitalize on as much athleticism as you possibly have. MMA is much more skill-oriented than just pure athleticism-oriented, so I do like the fact that Josh Quinlan doesn't have a ton of miles on his gas tank before coming into the UFC, because there's a lot of fighters out there who they have their fight of the nights in Bellator or in World Series of Fighting, PFL, whatever organization they came from, and they spend a lot of themselves on the regional scene before they ever make it to the big show. I like that Josh Quinlan has an established skill set, but hasn't taken a ton of big shots throughout his career, so I do like him in this matchup against Jason Witt, and I'm very curious to see just where his UFC career will take him.
6 wins will call it with the win on Contender Series, all by finish as a pro for Josh Quinlan. 6 as an amateur, 5 of those 6 by finish. He's looking to keep that streak alive this weekend. Both of us going with Vaughn Fight Team's own Josh Quinlan to get the win. The Maverick. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in this matchup. The Ultimate Fighter Season 30 finale later on this card, and you have Thiago Santos, Jamahal Hill in the main event. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
Coming up this weekend, as Ultimate Fighter champions will do, Bryan Battle enters into a new weight class. Coming up this weekend at welterweight for the first time in his career, Pooh Bear, a guy who's fought at heavyweight, a lot at light heavyweight, and a little bit at middleweight, will be making the move to 170 to take on the former Pancrase title challenger 10, Takashi Sato, who has another camp coming up this time at Sanford MMA. And listen, Sanford's been on a little bit of a run. I mean, if you look at it for Takashi Sato, he can probably gain a little bit of insight from a guy like Impa Kasanganay, who's taken on Bryan Battle, got out-wrestled by him as an amateur. And Bryan also has a win over Cody Brundage by split decision as an amateur. A guy who looks like hell on wheels at middleweight these days.
Does.
So, good opportunity for both of these guys. Obviously, for Battle, he beats Andre Petrowski by submission on The Ultimate Fighter. He wins the crown over Gilbert Urbina, a guy who got knocked out by Tresean Gore. He finishes him in that fight. He takes on Tresean Gore. He beats him in the first round, gets beat up a little bit in the second round. His eyes starts to swell up, but they let the fight go. And then in the third round, he just pours on the pressure. He's able to get the win. He proves himself as a real Ultimate Fighter. And now he takes on Takashi Sato at 170. Now, Matt, for Bryan Battle, you look at him on the Instagrams, and he's got abs all the time, which is something that you don't see very often unless you're like Luke Rockhold. Like, it's pretty weird to see that. But for Bryan Battle,
we started on Luke Rockhold after our fight companion.
Bryan Battle is completely cut up, so that's pretty cool to see. Training out of Carolina, and listen, he is an interesting case because for Battle, he didn't come into MMA with this glaring skill set where you go, wow, this guy's like a lights out Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, but he can't take guys down, or wow, this guy's such a good wrestler, but he doesn't know how to ground and pound or change positions. For Bryan Battle, he's a jack of all trades, but I'm not going to say master of none because he is pretty good at all of these different positions. He doesn't really set down a lot on his shots. I know we talked about that before we started to film, and it's never great to keep those dirty secrets from the fans, but he is a guy that kind of stays out a little bit to land his shots. He does land pretty good volume, but once you close the distance, you can hit him a little bit because he does tend to drop his hands. He is a decent wrestler, but he can get held up against the cage. He can get held down a little bit when he's on the ground, but he also has good get-ups and so on and so forth. So for Bryan Battle, he's a fun fighter to watch. I know I haven't talked about Takashi much yet, but for Battle, obviously it feels like his fight to lose. I'm just really eager to see what a guy who started off at heavyweight, who's never fought at welterweight in his career, looks like by like the second round, the third round of this.
It will be interesting to see, but the one good thing is, it's not like he's doing this after a fight a month ago or 2 months ago. He has had, 5 months now to get his body ready for 170 pounds, so I do feel like him and his team have done their due diligence with this weight cut, but again, like you said, we're not going to know until they actually weigh in, so maybe more than any other fight on this card, this is a fight for question mark kicks. Just see if Bryan Battle does not look good on the scales.
Because he looks cut up like 2-3 weeks ago. You still have to weigh in. So is he at 170 today, or is he going to cut a bunch of...
no way he's at 170.
No, I know. Obviously not. But where is he going to cut the extra weight? Is it going to be muscle? Like, what is it that he's going to have to cut? That's the thing.
Neither one of us are doctors or dietitians, so I'm going to hope that he can weigh in at 170, but you're right. He's going to be a big guy for this weight class, so I'm very curious to see how his skill set does translate down to 170%, because let's say he does have a massive skill or size advantage, over his opponents. What if it comes at the reduction of some of his skills because of the extreme weight cut? So that's something that'll be very interesting to see. This is my whole problem with just Bryan Battle and that whole season of The Ultimate Fighter. People used to care about this show, Craig. It was like...
They care this week. They care this week.
They care this week because of us. But let's be honest. People used to care about The Ultimate Fighter like it was baseball in the 80s. Like, it felt like a national sport. Now it's a regional one. It's just so strange that we went from having guys like Yair Rodriguez winning the season of Latin America, and like he's one of the biggest stars.
Leonardo Santos, Brazil.
That's, like, not all of them pan out, but it has felt like a very long time. Definitely post the break that they took when Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker had coached. I haven't been nearly as excited for this show. That's just going to be me being 100% honest.
The fighters this week are not that good.
And, like, we were both pretty excited about Bryan Battle and Ricky Tercios coming into the UFC, but, like, have they given us many reasons to be excited since? Not really. Like, Bryan Battle is a good win over Tresean Gore, but if you watch that fight, you're not looking at Tresean Gore thinking, wow, he's a future top 15 fighter that Bryan Battle beat. So
he's now 3-2.
Exactly. So I think this fight against Takashi Sato is probably going to be the best litmus test that he can possibly have, because for Sato, he is a very nice pinpoint striker. He has very nice boxing on the outside. Likes to throw a bit of a body kick, but the problem with Takashi Sato is, I feel like ever since the Bilal Muhammad fight, he's become a lot more tentative with his own striking, because people now know how weak his defensive grappling is. It's hard to be really dedicated to your power shots and to your own aggression when people know that in the back of their minds, all they have to do is shoot 1, maybe 2 takedowns, and they're probably going to be able to secure one of those and then get minutes, not just moments on top position.
Yeah, and you could tell Takashi Sato, I mean, coming into the UFC from Pancrase, he has some nice wins. A win over Matt Valley before he made the jump over. That was a Pancrase 300 in 2018.
He destroyed fight poor Ben Saunders.
He fights Killer B Ben Saunders, a fan favorite, or at least an Allen favorite, and he looked really good in that fight. Bilal Muhammad grounds him out. So Jason Witt goes into their fight on a day's notice, and it was originally supposed to be against, who was it? Was it Maki Pitolo?
I think so.
So yeah, on a day's, or no, it was Ramiz Brahimaj. So on a day's notice, you have Jason Witt coming in. Like, Glory's already there. Jason's there. I can make the weight. Put me in, coach. Jason goes deep single leg. Takashi goes, no, you don't. Left hook and just
bonked him.
Yeah, he knocked him dead. So from that, Takashi's not really given necessarily an easy fight.
If he gets submitted by Miguel Baeza, I'm going to have concerns about your grappling.
But that's it. He gets taken down, submitted by Miguel Baeza. He fights Gunnar Nelson, and he looked super tentative. And he got held down for minutes and minutes upon minutes. He didn't look good in that Gunnar Nelson fight. And that was the Nelson comeback train fight. That was the call on me.
Yeah.
We had been years from that, but that was that Gunnar Nelson just training straight out of Iceland, not SBG. I haven't liked the Takashi that I've seen. I know what the skills are. His boxing's good. Like you said, he throws in combinations. He's got a really good lead left hook, not just dropping it down on a Witt takedown, and a really good body kick. But obviously the grappling's the trouble. And for Bryan Battle, the grappling can be a big plus, but at 170, who knows? Like, that's the big question mark.
It is a question mark, but I do think his size and physicality is going to pay off. Because let's say Takashi is good enough skill-wise to defend a few takedowns from Bryan Battle. Because, like you said, Battle doesn't really have a background in any singular martial art. He is very well-rounded with his style. But if you're a lot bigger and a lot stronger than your opponent, and if you have been working on your wrestling, all those things are going to matter. And again, I keep on going back to the fact that Sato just looks like a different fighter now that people know what his massive weakness is. Not that you couldn't tell when he came into the UFC, but people had such a respect for his power that they weren't willing to just go in, shoot for the takedown, and not really worry about it. Now, Jason Witt got caught, but like we just got done saying in the last prediction video we made, Jason Witt does get caught in a lot of his fights. I think Takashi Sato looks like Derek White in the finals. Derek White's a good three-point shooter, but he's not a great three-point shooter. So once the Golden State Warriors stopped respecting that part of his game, he seemed a little razzled and he didn't really know what to do, even when he was open from the three-point line. That's what Takashi's striking reminds me of now. It's like, hey, I know I'm good at this thing, but if I really start to show my striking, that's when my opponent will have the opportunity to take me down and find that opening in my game. So I think Sato's pure striking at 100% confidence would be enough to at least hurt somebody like Bryan Battle. I just don't believe he has the well-rounded game necessary to take on the bigger and much younger guy in Battle.
I don't think you can become a lifelong wrestler out of training for a couple of camps at Sanford MMA. I think you're definitely going to get better at it, and he's somebody that's training mainly with Vicente Luque in this camp, with Marc-Andre Barrio and Ang Laun Sung, as well as Impa Kasanganay. But when I do look at this one, the odds, Bryan Battle open to -200, -230. Sato open +170, +182. We have a look at the Tapology vote and accidentally slid down and saw what it was before this one. So I'm not going to leave it as a surprise because I'm honest with the fans. 1,040 total votes, 85% Bryan Battle, 69% by decision, 19% by submission for the 15% that have Sato, 54% by decision, 34% by knockout. This is, like, I can't harp on this enough. I don't know what the hell Bryan Battle's cardio is going to look like. I don't know. So if you're looking to anchor something to this, don't do it because there's too many question marks with Bryan Battle. I like his overall skill set, but it's a really hard one to go, geez, I think Bryan Battle wins this fight like 9 times out of 10. If this was a middleweight, sure, but he's never fought at welterweight, so I don't necessarily know what he's going to look like.
Last basketball reference for this video, Bryan Battle reminds me of like when there's a draft where you don't know who the number 1 pick's going to be. It could be like any of 5 people and just one of them is probably going to turn out to be really good. Bryan Battle could be great in the future at 170. He could have a massive size advantage over everybody, carry his power down a weight class, be really good with his wrestling. Like, there is a world where this is the best thing for his career, but there's also a world where, like you said, his cardio is affected, his skill set is diminished. So I do like Bryan Battle for the sake of a prediction, but there's enough red flags there to where I'm a little bit concerned to see how his skill set does translate down a weight class, because that's the thing. In boxing, if you want to move weight classes, it's 6 pounds. You can do that. Like, Danny Garcia used to be the champion at 140. He just fought at 154 and looked pretty good. And he had fought at 147 too. In middleweight or in MMA, sorry, like, there's massive jumps in between weight classes. Unless you do featherweight to lightweight, which is kind of similar, it's only 10 pounds. Like, the jump between welterweight to middleweight, 15 pounds. The jump between middleweight to light heavyweight, 20 pounds. Like, there is a massive difference between some of these weight classes. So, again, I'm very curious to see how Battle looks on the scale.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Takashi Sato goes in, lands a nice boxing combination, kicks it off by landing a body kick, stuns Bryan Battle, who's depleted, and then goes out there and finishes him. There's a world where that's going to happen. I like Battle with all of the skill sets, but I'm really close on this one. I have it as a pretty well 50-50. So both of us going with a guy whose nickname is just at Pooh Bear. Bryan Battle to get the win in the welterweight debut. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in this fight. If you like The Ultimate Fighter, you're an oddball. But we have the two finales, heavyweight and flyweight. And in the main event, Thiago Santos, Maheta, taking on Sweet Dreams Jamahal Hill. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Somebody booked Terrance McKinney versus the Ghost Pepper Erick Gonzalez, and we have to talk about it. So, listen, this is going to be one of the weirder videos from Fight Night Picks because I'm going to open the curtain, let you in on a little bit inside baseball. We do these videos, we look at the rankings. They don't really mean a whole heck of a lot because, let's face it, I mean, they just throw numbers out there. I know it's aggregated based on what the media does, but it doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. It's used to sell a fight. But I do kind of like some of those ranking aggregates that are out there. So I can let that tell a little bit of a story. So I did my deep dive on this fight. Terrance McKinney on Tapology is ranked as their 34th lightweight. And that includes all the different organizations. Bellator, KSW, Cage Warriors. Terrance McKinney slots in at number 34. Erick Gonzalez slots in at 136. There's a big disparity between them. Fight Matrix also has these guys ranked. Now, Terrance McKinney is ranked very low on that website. He's ranked at 128, so around that Erick Gonzalez ranking. Erick Gonzalez is ranked 238th. So 128 and 238. Matt, the disparity between these guys is huge. The only reason why this is a fun fight is because they both can tend to brawl, and that's what gives Erick Gonzalez an opportunity in this one.
I was thinking it's going to be really interesting to see how Terrance McKinney comes back after taking quite a bit of damage in his last fight. That's the thing. We all remember the fight of the night because it was back and forth with him and Drew Dober, but McKinney did eat a lot of big shots from Dober, especially near the end of that fight. You know, you rarely lose by TKO and not eat big shots, but still, Terrance McKinney did absorb quite a bit of damage in that matchup, so I'm a little curious to see how he bounces back after a fight like that. We've seen a lot of fighters take a lot of damage and then come back as different versions of themselves, but the difference is between McKinney and all those other fighters. Let's bring up like Alexander Gustafsson, for instance, a guy who had a long career taking damage, took time off, came back, didn't look very good. Well, Terrance McKinney's only 27 years old in the prime of his career, and let's be honest, up until that Drew Dober fight, at least in his UFC tenure, looked as good as any prospect had looked up until that point. For Ghost Pepper Gonzalez, like you said, he does invite the brawl, so I do think this fight's going to be very fun for as long as it lasts, but Terrance McKinney can brawl and be that sort of meathead in a game plan, but he's also very technical with his own boxing on the outside, and the thing that I do like from McKinney is, you would talk about how not every fighter uses their reach equally, with Stephanie Egger, Mayra, Bueno, Silva. Terrance McKinney does use his reach quite effectively until some fighters can get on the inside. Now, he was able to light Drew Dober up from the outside as Drew Dober was trying to close distance and get close to him. The difference is, Drew Dober is one of the better lightweights in the world. I think we can all agree on that. And Erick Gonzalez is not, I don't think. And I just don't think Gonzalez is able to eat the big power shots to then have success afterwards. Because Terrance McKinney brings a big storm into the octagon. And I haven't even mentioned his wrestling once, which, let's be honest, is a pretty big part of his game.
High school state champion wrestler in Washington. He went to wrestle in D2. Obviously, that's kind of where the life story changes. You've seen the promos by the UFC. You saw it before Dana White's Contender Series, the individual videos. He stuck with wrestling. He went to Notre Dame, and then he left Notre Dame to become an MMA fighter. But you look at the losses for both these two guys, and they're telling because both guys have losses to good fighters. It's not just Terrance McKinney, it's Erick Gonzalez as well. But for McKinney, loses to Sean Woodson on Dana White's Contender Series, beating him in the first round. In the second round, competitive. Gets up from the takedown, eats a knee for his troubles, gets finished. Takes on Darrick Minner the next fight, goes to take him down. Gets into a submission.
It's going to happen fighting Darrick Minner, though.
Takes on Drew Dober, drops him twice. The flying knees that landed Dober back. He's trying to finish him. He gets a couple takedowns and then ultimately kind of slowed down a little bit, and that's where Dober was able to take over with his own offense. And then the one other loss that Terrance McKinney has to Henderson, it's due to a leg injury. So it's all with a little bit of grain of salt. Like Jason Jackson hurt his leg on Contender Series, and that's why he's not fighting in the UFC, and he's with Bellator, and he's going to be fighting for a title, or he has the interim title. When you look at it for McKinney, all those things are true. When you look at it for Erick Gonzalez, the losses to Jim Miller, the winningest fighter in UFC history, a loss to Humberto Bandenay, and a loss to Rafa Garcia over with Combate. Now, there are 3 other losses out there, and they're the lesser fighters, but if you look at it for Ghost Pepper, decent offensive wrestling, not the greatest takedown defense, good at brawling, is hittable. You saw that in the last fight against Jim Miller. The old lefty cold cocked him and knocked him out cold.
And we love Jim Miller on this channel. He's old,
yeah.
He's been around forever. A 40-year-old Jim Miller's not the biggest knockout puncher in the world.
Apparently now he is.
Okay, yeah, the second he hit 40, he
Nicholas
got like
Mata.
the might of Zeus in his hands, but still, Terrance McKinney is a whole hell of a lot more heavy-handed than Jim Miller is at this stage of his career. Really, the question for me is, where does Terrance McKinney go after this fight? And we never mentioned this before the show started. Do you think he is on a crash course for Paddy Pimblett, though? I feel like that was out there in the media for a long time. Those guys are going back and forth on Twitter. I feel like that could be a logical next step for both of them, because for McKinney, he had his chance to go up there and fight one of the better fighters. Kind of his gatekeeper into the top 15 was Drew Dober. Paddy Pimblett is looking for a big fight. It just, to me, it does feel like if McKinney is able to get the win this weekend, that would be a logical next step for both athletes.
Yeah, I use the example just there, like I did on the weekend. Like Mike Napoli, that one in 2013, put it up on a tee, hit that one out of the park, make that fight, because I think this is one of those ones, it feels like a setup fight. It really does. And it's unfortunate for Erick Gonzalez. He was originally supposed to take on Devontae Smith this past spring. Would have been another interesting fight, but he was out of that one due to a foot injury. I dug into it. I listened to an interview from a couple of weeks ago from James Lynch MMA, and in that one, he said that an up kick in training, he threw an up kick against his teammate. The teammate wasn't wearing a mouth guard. The teeth went into the foot like Gerard Gordeau, Taylor Tooley. So it was a deep cut. He had to get stitches. The nerves got hurt. And so he's had to take some time off. He had to take 3 weeks off of training. And now he's been back in it. So he's ready for a fight against Terrance McKinney. That was quite a while ago, like early this year. So I'm not worried about it affecting this fight. But you look at the odds. No play. Terrance McKinney open to -400, -944 on best fight odds for Gonzalez. Open +300, +589. You can find him on Twitch. He's always on Twitch. If you look at it over on Topology, the votes are a surprise to us, the RDU, and I honestly don't know what this was. I'm going to say over under 90% McKinney. It's probably over.
It's over 90.
It's 98% of 1,119 total votes. 84% by knockout for the 2% that have Ghost Pepper. 48% by knockout. I think if Gonzalez wins, it's probably going to be by finish. Both these guys are down to bang. I've got McKinney. There's always a chance that Gonzalez could catch him because both guys will brawl. It's not the most technical boxing. I do like McKinney, like you said, those long-range pawing attacks, but his wrestling's so good. If he wrestles and then finishes Gonzalez, I feel like that's the way that pop goes the weasel, you fight Paddy Pimblett.
That's how I think this fight's going to go. I think McKinney will strike for a little bit. We'll see about 90 seconds of action. He's going to shoot for a takedown and land some ground and pound, probably. That's how I see this fight going. It should be as fun as it really can be for as long as it lasts, because, like I said, Gonzalez is down to bang, but against Terrance McKinney, that's probably not your best path to victory, so I have Terrance McKinney, but again, I'm much more curious to see where this puts Terrance McKinney in the future than the fight itself.
-900, too rich for my blood. Both of us going with T-Rex, Terrance McKinney, to get the win. Let us know down below if you're Erick Gonzalez or one of his friends, family, or training partners. We have a big-time fight coming up this weekend in the main event. Thiago Santos taking on Jamahal Hill. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Coming up this weekend, it's UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Jamahal Hill. An aging legend versus an up-and-coming fighter. Now, there's also a fight at middleweight between a couple of guys that, listen, I just look at it in different ways.
Can we call Sam Alvey an aging legend?
Well, listen, in the Northeast, it's Maine's official soda. It's Moxie soda. Now, Penn Teller, if I'm not mistaken, named one of his kids Moxie. It's a great soda. It tastes like Dr. Pepper and whatever
I think it's
else.
more like Jaeger without the alcohol.
Well, and I'm a big Jaeger Dr. Pepper guy, but that's neither here nor there. It's a weird soda. And this is a weird fight, because if you look at it for Sam Alvey, what are some of the worst runs that we've ever seen in the UFC? Well, Phil Baroni lost 6 fights in a row.
Andre Arlovski lost a lot.
Andre Arlovski lost 5 in a row. Elvis Sinicic lost 6 in a row. BJ Penn lost 7 in a row. Sam Alvey's lost 7 in a row. And there's a draw peppered in there. And there's a fight of the night against Julian Marquez. But the last time that Sam Alvey won a fight, it was to cap, you're not going to believe me, a 7-2 run. He beat Jean Vellante by split decision. And in the 7-2 run, there was one fight where he was the underdog. It was against Marcin Prachnio when Marcin went marching with his hands down like a zombie and got knocked out cold by Sam Alvey. That was the only time he was an underdog. There was a time where Sam Alvey beat Rashad Evans. You believe that?
It wasn't Sugar Rashad, though. It was Rashad who had lost a bunch of fights and moved down to middleweight. But yes, he did beat him.
It did happen. So for Sam Alvey, the losing streak's wild. Under every UFC roster watch tweet where somebody's signed or somebody's cut, Sam Alvey's there with a cigar in his mouth. Sam Alvey's an anomaly.
Here's the thing about Sam Alvey, and just a lot of losing streaks in general, and maybe we have a different opinion on this, we've never talked about this, but this is my theory, and this is how I feel about it. You can lose 3 or 4 fights in a row if you're not taking, like, life-changing damage in them. If you're losing close split decisions, or let's say you're getting out-wrestled in a lot of fights, then I'm okay with someone losing 3, maybe even 4 fights in a row and still getting the opportunity because, okay, maybe some of their other skills are really good. I think of, like, a Mark Chikasi who had gone on a 3-fight losing streak. Might not be the best guy in the UFC, but still, you don't cut a fighter who's that talented after 3 losses.
I think somebody like if Andre Feely lost a bunch or Alex Caceres, you're gonna keep them. They're a litmus test. They're crafty.
That's why I bring up Mark Chikasi, who is that exact example and went through the losses. But with Sam Alvey, he is taking a lot of damage at this stage of his career to where it's not fun anymore, if you will. Like, not that it was ever fun to watch him lose, but before it was Sam Alvey losing a low-volume contest to where he doesn't throw a lot offensively, but his opponent won't throw a lot offensively because, okay, we both understand Sam Alvey has power, he's sort of basic with his game, so let's be honest, they were resulting in some boring fights along the way. His last few fights, though, have been a little bit different, and that's why I'm kind of surprised that he is still sticking around in the UFC, because think about the Julian Marquez fight. Yes, he's able to hit Julian a couple of times. He gets rocked and almost knocked out on his feet and then choked unconscious. Like, it is getting to the point now where it's not just him losing these close decisions where it's like, okay, haha, Sam Alvey lost another split decision. He's starting to take big power shots and he's not reacting to them the same way that he used to be able to react to them. And that's why I'm concerned about this matchup against formerly known as Lord Michał Oleksiejczuk, now Hussar.
Hussar, 15th to 16th century, light cavalry.
They had wings on their back. They were cool looking.
Swords and such. But when you look at it for Sam Alvey, 4 of those 7 losses on this streak are by finish, and he's been dropped 5 times. Like, Sam Alvey's known for, yeah, he's got the stupid top to bottom mouth guard because he broke his jaw at one point, so it's not really that stupid, but he's always smiling, to getting hit, and then he gets real mad, and it's like, hey, but this guy's a smiley face shaved into the back of his head, and now it's like, what, why?
Is Sam Alvey the DeAndre Jordan of the UFC? What are we doing here? Why are we still doing it? The Nuggets went out of their way to make their team worse by putting DeAndre Jordan on it. I don't understand why he's still in the NBA, and I don't understand why Sam Alvey's still in the UFC.
So for Hussar, he's 5-3 in the UFC. Kinda. He's 4-3 in the UFC with a no contest. He tested positive for clomiphene after the Khalil Roundtree fight, so he had to take some time away. It's a no contest. He won a decision. If you look at it, I mean, this is one of those rare Southpaw versus Southpaw matchups, so the Spider-Man, what are we doing here? But for Michał Oleksiejczuk, when I look at any of his fights to try and match up to this one, it's probably the fight he had against Shamil Gamzatov, because Gamzatov's a low-volume power puncher. Now, Gamzatov is known as a wrestler if he wins, but against Hussar, he didn't. He struck. And for Sam Alvey, he's a guy who has a propensity to getting backed up against the cage, or at least behind the black line. And I like that from Michał, because he was able to pick his shots. And he's one of those guys that he'll pump the jab out there to then pop to the body, pull back, and then he'll throw his lead hook. And I like those things out of Oleksiejczuk. The one thing I don't like out of Lord Michał, trains out of Ankos MMA, and there's a lot of big-time fighters out of there, like Marcin Wojcik's one of the fighters, Boris Mankowski, Michael Andrazik, like a lot of people that are of KSW lineage, let's face it. But when I do look at it, and now I cheated and accidentally saw the Tapology votes, but when I do look at it for Oleksiejczuk, he doesn't throw a lot of kicks, boxing heavy guy, and the way to beat Lord Michał, and it's easier said than done, it's by volume. And you look at the losses that he has in the UFC, 1 to OSP by submission, listen, that's going to happen. 1 to Jimmy Crute by submission, it's going to happen. The wins, Modestas Bukauskas through volume. Michael's able to back him up and throw bigger shots, so he won. He beat Shamil Gamzatov by finish, but Dustin Jacoby beat him because the volume and the forward pressure.
But also, could you imagine what would happen if Sam Alvey fought Dustin Jacoby?
It'd be a lot of ha, and Sam just getting mad.
Sam Alvey would not make it out of the first round, I don't think. Like, Dustin Jacoby is a really good fighter who has great striking. No. He's not?
I have a hard time.
He knocked out John. Like, this is my point. Lord Michał, like you said, struggles with people who throw a lot of volume, or they're dominant wrestlers who can take advantage of his poor wrestling defense. The weird thing about Oleksiejczuk is, he's not a bad offensive wrestler. Like, if you go back to the Khalil Roundtree fight, that's how he beat him. He took him down 100 times and just took all the air out of the cage. So, it is interesting that we haven't necessarily seen that version of Oleksiejczuk since coming to the UFC. But if we just look at these guys, okay, maybe the bare bones of their game are very similar. Neither guy's a lot of volume. They both focus on the power shots. A power shot from Michał Oleksiejczuk at this stage of his career is a lot more valuable than a power shot from Sam Alvey. And like you said, Sam Alvey does have a hard time landing his own power shots at this stage of his career. Other than you walking towards him with grocery bags in your hands, like, I just don't know what Sam Alvey's going to do to open Oleksiejczuk up for his power shots, because Michał does have a very high guard. He does move his head very well from left to right. Sometimes he will move into shots, but I don't think Sam Alvey's the type of guy who can set the traps on the feet necessary to really make Oleksiejczuk zig when he should zag. And like, Oleksiejczuk's a minus 550 favorite, and I think we all like his fighting style. Like, his fights are fun, but he has obvious strengths and obvious weaknesses. He is not a ranked fighter at all. And the fact that he is almost a 6-1 favorite over Sam Alvey kind of shows you where Alvey is in his career.
Little Nog started off the losing streak for Sam Alvey, and the last one was against Brendan Allen, where he also got finished. Michał Oleksiejczuk open to minus 330, minus 560. For Sam Alvey, open to plus 270, plus 425 or thereabouts. We have a look at the Topology votes. The mouse slid, so we'll give it to you. 1,000 plus votes. 94% Oleksiejczuk, 20% by decision, 71% by knockout. For the 6% that have Smiling Sam, 57% by decision, 31% by knockout. The UFC is letting him fight out his career. I don't see Smiling Sam win unless Michał walks in and he went to the grocery store that sells cinder blocks for dinner, like Marcin Prakniel bought when he went there. I don't see Oleksiejczuk losing. Again, Oleksiejczuk side to side, not the best. The head movement's all right, but back and forth laterally, he does move pretty well for a middleweight. He is a smaller middleweight. I know he's 6 feet and he's got a
light heavyweight
74-inch reach. He's not a big giant guy, so I'll be interested to see, again, what Lord Michał looks like at 185, because it will be interesting. But if you do look at him over on Instagram, he looks really good physically coming into this one. I think the move down to 185 is going to work out very well for him. Again, guy who's spent the large majority of his career at light heavyweight, so it'll be interesting to see how the younger guy looks at 185. That's the one caveat, excuse me. But for me, I've got Michał Oleksiejczuk in this one.
So do I. Again, Sam Alvey at maybe 205 pounds would have a slightly better chance of winning this because he wouldn't have to cut the additional weight. His chin might be a little bit better, but Oleksiejczuk hits so much harder than Sam Alvey at this stage of his career. He likes to fight in the pocket. Like, there's a lot of red flags if you're a Sam Alvey backer, so I think Oleksiejczuk's going to win this one, and more than likely, probably by stoppage.
Both of us going with Hussar to get the win coming up this weekend. Let us know how you feel about Oleksiejczuk's move to middleweight. It should be a fun one. In the main event, a former middleweight, now light heavyweight, Thiago Santos taking on Jamahal Hill. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big fight coming up this weekend. The Queen of Violence returned to form her last time out, and she's looking to get a win over zombie girl Priscila Cachoeira, a fan favorite, a channel favorite. We know you love her, and so do we. Her fights are fun, and her last time out, a big-time fight of the night against Ji-Yeon Kim, where everybody thought Ji-Yeon Kim won 2 rounds, and Priscila Cachoeira is still waiting for her Oscar after her interview that was the most awkward thing I've ever seen. They gave her a belt in jiu-jitsu, even though she did no jiu-jitsu.
It was weird.
All she does is power strike match. She switched up her camp. She used to be with Prana Valetudo. She's now with Team Figueiredo. And Team Figueiredo, I mean, Figueiredo's not even with Team Figueiredo anymore. So is that weird?
It's very weird. I couldn't imagine still training in a gym where the owner/operator, I don't know the logistics of the gym, but still, it must be strange being like, hey, is he coming back? Like, do you think they say,
Francisco, where's he at, bud?
Devison went to get cigarettes and never came back. Like, is that what they're telling each other at the gym at this point?
I don't know. I mean, the guy dresses...
He rode away on Fernando the Bull, and they never saw him again.
I mean, he rocks around in sequin red shirts with Black Panthers, and then he cuts the weirdest promo I've ever seen with Brandon Reynolds for a fourth fight. But for Priscila Cachoeira, her last time out, she utilized her boxing, her power punching to get the win over Ji-Yeon Kim. I didn't think she won, but 2 judges did, so that's all that matters. I guess 3 of them did. It was a unanimous decision. She loses to Jillian Robertson by submission. She looked like a fish out of water in that one, and Robertson had nice enough things to say about her. Beat Gina Mazzani by knockout, where Mazzani looked good in the first round, had no gas in the second round. Beat Shannon Dobson by knockout 2.5 years ago. Lost to Luana Carolina by decision. She lost to Valentina Shevchenko in her UFC debut. She lost to Molly McCann by decision. And before that, from 2016 to 2017, she went on an 8-fight win streak and looked amazing and finished a lot of those by finish. That makes sense, Matt.
And that was the selling point going into the Valentina fight. Like, it was, hey, The zombie girl, you may have never heard of her. This is on short notice. This is her debut. But boy, has she finished a lot of women on the regional scene.
I'm sure Red Letter Media, if they're even a part of, like, interested in Fight Night picks, they're probably likening Priscila Cachoeira's Zombie Girl to the trailer of The Munsters by Rob Zombie, my guy. Because that trailer, they picked that damn thing apart. And I was halfway excited for that movie, and now I'm there.
I haven't seen Nope yet. I'm still very excited to see it.
Fair enough.
Haven't watched it.
This fight, though, Ariane Lipski did look very good her last time out against Mandy Boom. Almost dropped her in the first round, at least rocked her. Dropped her in the second, dropped her in the third. Before that, 2-fight losing streak to Montana De La Rosa. Antonina Shevchenko had beaten Luana Carolina. Performance of the night bonus. Submission of the year caliber knee bar where she went full violence. Beat Isabella De Padua, former KSW champ. Won the belt, defended it twice. Beat Diana Belbizzi to win it. Her last title defense was over Silvana Gomez Juarez. It's in the UFC. But for Ariane Lipski, when you boil this fight down, Priscila Cachoeira, forward motion, boxing combinations, throws with a lot of power, brings the most emotion to her fight. For Ariane Lipski, switched her training up, trains at American Top Team, and she's primarily known as a Muay Thai artist that throws a lot of kicks. She's all right with her ground game, but not with her takedowns, and neither one of these women are all that adept on the ground.
This is my problem with the Queen of Violence. We talked about this a lot when Molly McCann fought her last fight. It was, hey Molly, you're a big deal. When are you going to fight people on the borderline of the rankings? And for Lipski, she did kind of have that opportunity in 2 fights against Shevchenko and De La Rosa, but she didn't look good in those fights at all. For me, I just had a lot higher expectations for Lipski when she came over to the UFC, and she has not been able to reach that at all. So this is kind of a get back on the horse fight for both these athletes, because Cachoeira is a very...
Whoa. Get back on the horse. Lipski looked really good in her last fight.
Okay, she looked really good in her last fight, but when she's fought anybody near the rankings, she hasn't looked great, and that's my big problem. You are the champion of KSW. You are the queen of violence. You have not been that fighter at the UFC level whatsoever, and for me, I think this fight more than any else on the card comes down to volume over power, because if Lipski is able to stand on the outside, use some of that good Muay Thai, keep her hands up, which is really going to be a key factor in this fight, because for Priscila, we can talk about the negatives, we can talk about the eye pokes in the Jillian Robertson fight, they were awful, we can talk about her porous takedown defense. She does have very good power in her hands, though, and that's something you cannot take away from her. I know her knockout wins over the likes of Shayna Dobson and Gina Mazzani, and like you said, Mazzani looked good until she didn't, but not a lot of women in this weight division can just go out there and get TKO and KO victories, and Priscila, I would say, is one of the rare few who, if she can hit you with 4 or 5 power shots in a row, she's gonna put you down, or at least make you a much different version of yourself than you were earlier on in the fight. So that's where I can see a world where Priscila can have success. Let's say she can get on the inside of Lipski, start landing some of those boxing combinations, and let's say, 3 or 4 power shots do land, then maybe Cachoeira does have a game plan for some victories, but for Lipski, I really do like her steadiness with her striking in this matchup. I think some of those front kicks are going to be a really big problem for Priscila, because Priscila does kind of square up her stance and walk in on just a straight line, and I think if Lipski is able to start employing some of her kicks, like you said, neither fighter's great on the mat, so I don't think Lipski's going to be all that concerned about the takedown attempts from Cachoeira, and I do think that's going to allow Lipski to really open up her striking game plan to its highest potential.
When I look at a battle between strikers, and let's face it, again, Cachoeira gets the belt, but that was like, here you go, here's the prize at the bottom of the cereal box, you won the fight, I guess we're doing this. When you look at it for Lipski, it's the more complete skill set on the feet versus the power puncher in Priscila Cachoeira. It's not like Randy Couture, James Toney. It's not anything like that. But when you do boil it down that way, I look at it similar to when Cachoeira fought somebody who's very good at Muay Thai in Luana Carolina. She got dropped in that fight. There were 30-26s there. There's better volume for Lipski as well. So when it boils down to it, you look at the odds. Lipski open to -180, -175 or thereabouts. For Priscila Cachoeira, open +155. +145. We have a look at the Tapology votes. This time I didn't accidentally scroll, so the votes are a surprise to us there to you. I'm going to say over-under. Again, Priscila Cachoeira is 3-4 in the UFC. Lipski's been so-so. I'm going to say over-under 67.5% Lipski.
I think it'll be under, but she'll be the favorite.
All right. 1,002 total votes. 83% Lipski. 83% by decision. For the 17% that have Cachoeira, 62% by decision. 26% by knockout. I think Ariane Lipski wins this one. More complete skill set on the feet. More varied attack. Again, if she gets clinched up, Priscila Cachoeira can land some power shots in the clinch, land some uppercuts, but apart from that, I do like the prodding kicking game of Lipski to get this one done. And listen, she doesn't really tend to teeter off between round 1, round 2, round 3. She can keep a decent volume, and you saw it her last time out with the knockdowns as the fight progressed. She looked very good in that one, and I liken her to the fighter that we saw, back in the KSW days compared to Cachoeira, who went 8-0 between June of 2016 and September 2017 and has had mixed results, albeit against different levels of competition in the UFC.
I agree with the breakdown. I do think Lipski is the more well-rounded fighter on the feet with her technical ability, but Priscilla's a much tougher fight than Mandy Boom. Yes, you can look good against Mandy. That doesn't mean that much to me, if I'm being honest. I saw you lose to by far the 2 best fighters you fought in the division, and I saw you beat somebody who, let's be honest, we all fully expect her to beat Mandy Boom. So I think this fight against Cachoeira is sort of another reset for her. If she's able to win this, then maybe we do give her another borderline top 15 or maybe even a ranked opponent next. But I do like Lipski's ability to throw kicks and include her punches into that, where Cachoeira is more of just a boxer, and unless she's able to get into that range, I can see her just eating a lot of pot shots throughout 15 minutes in this fight.
Both of us going with the Queen of Violence to keep that crown. We're going with Ariane Lipski to get the win. If you're going with the former title, I guess, eliminator fighter when Cachoeira made her debut, and that was the end of the Yamasaki era. You let us know if you're going with Cachoeira in this one. We have the finale of the Ultimate Fighter, heavyweights and flyweights, and in the main event, Thiago Santos taking on Jamahal Hill. Not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Sergey Spivak is on a quest for the rankings, and coming up this weekend, he's taking on the 14th ranked UFC heavyweight Augusto Sakai. A guy who is a guy and was once 15-1-1 in this division. And when you get to that record, you think, geez, who could that one loss be to?
Oh, I know.
I bet it was Czech Congo by split decision. Oh, wait, yes, it was. And that was when Augusto Sakai was over with Bellator. And we had a Dana White's Contender Series breakdown show here on the channel. We did it live, and one of the commenters said, if you're from Bellator and you end up in the UFC, you're never going to be all that good. Eddie Alvarez won a belt, Michael Chandler challenged for one, so sometimes not all things are created equal. But out of Sakai, he was 15-1-1. And I mean, listen, he came in off Dana White's Contender Series 2018 season Brazil. He gets a win over Marcos Conrado Jr. He beats Chase Sherman, beats Andrei Arlovsky by split decision, as you will. Beats Marcin Tybura in a minute. He just walked him down, got him close to the fence, landed a right hand and dropped him. Beats Blagoy Ivanov by split decision where he grabbed the cage a few times. Loses to Alistair Overeem in the 5th round of their main event after he nearly finished him in the 1st round. And then 2nd round was close, 3rd round was close, and then 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, Alistair Overeem realized, well, I can wrestle in this one, and I fought Curtis Blades, and I've trained with Curtis Blades. What if I land some elbows? Oh boy, that's how you finish him? And that's how he did. You have Sakai going on and fighting Jairzinho Rosenstrike, who had that gleam in his eye and decided, I'm going to go hard near the end of this one. Lunges forward, lands a hook, drops it right behind the ear of Sakai, drops him, finishes him. And in the fight against Tai Tuivasa had success in positions where usually Augusto Sakai does. He pressured him up against the cage, landed good elbows and good punches in tight, and then finished that one up, just pressuring him all the way across the cage and finishing him, and then doing a shoey from the Nelk Boys. So, Nelk Boys notwithstanding, Matt, Augusto Sakai was a 15-1 fighter who's now lost his last 3 fights by finish, and people are down on him, and rightfully so.
Oh, that's the hand? Well, no wonder they're down on him. He has lost 3 fights in a row by knockout. That's the concerning thing, though. The Alistair Overeem fight was a really fun fight if you go back and watch it. It was back and forth early on, but like you said, when Alistair realized he had a massive grappling advantage over Augusto Sakai, he kind of used his Sergey Pavlovich game plan, if you will. He went for the takedown, got a lot of really nice ground and pound off, and Sakai never really had an answer for it. That's the weird thing about Sakai. His size almost makes him too big to be on his back. I know that's a wild thing to say, but he is as big of a heavyweight as you can possibly be. He's 6'3". He weighs in at the absolute limit of the weight division, but he carries himself like a big guy. I know that's a weird thing to say. Very square at the shoulders and very upright when he strikes. That's concerning for this reason. He was able to eat a ton of damage against Alistair, right? If you look back at these significant strikes, he lands in, I think it's like 100, but he eats like 160. I'm a little concerned about a guy who eats 160 power shots from Alistair Overeem now getting knocked out by 1 shot. And that is something that at the heavyweight division, listen, everyone's a power puncher. Andrei Arlovski was told that he had a glass chin for years and years, and somehow his chin came back and he's a little bit better with it now. But you understand my hesitation with a guy who has lost 3 fights in a row, all by pretty one-sided stoppages. It was, hey, you were able to eat a lot of shots, and then you went down. Now you're only eating 1 shot, and you're getting wobbled by that 1 shot. And Sakai doesn't have really good recovery. I remember we were watching Cachoeira France versus Cody Garbrandt together, just talking about how Garbrandt can't eat a shot well. It's not just the fact that he can't eat a shot well, he doesn't recover great after he gets hit. And with Sakai, especially in his last 2 fights, he doesn't react in the best way after he gets hit by that big power shot.
I will say this, if you go and watch Augusto Sakai, there were some of the fights, one of the overeem shots, one of the shots in one of the fights that he had won as well. You look at him and he gets hit and he kind of just takes a little bit of a reset. It almost looks like a reset, but when I watched it, I went, ooh, he's rocked right there. Nobody's really talking about it. And then as it goes on, of course, yeah, he did get rocked. Now, if you want to play MMA math in this one, these guys have wins and losses to the same opponents. Marcin Tybura beat Sergey Spivak and Augusto Sakai finished him in a minute. Sergey Spivak grounded out Tai Tuivasa when he was on that losing streak. Augusto Sakai got knocked out by Tai Tuivasa's last time out, who's now going to be taking on Cyril Gahn. So I look at it for Sergey Spivak, the former WWFC champion at heavyweight. Yes, he beat Tony Lopez. That's a rite of passage. He loses to Walt Harris in the UFC in 50 seconds. He beats Tuivasa, loses to Tybura, beats Carlos Felipe in a fight where Felipe had success on the feet, but Spivak had success with the takedowns. Vandera, that's a wash.
We all knew what was going to happen.
Beats Alexei Oleinik and makes him look like not even like the same caliber of fighter when they're striking. So I thought Spivak looked really good in that decision win. Loses to Tom Aspinall, which was a really weird one because he just couldn't get going and Aspinall was hitting him flush and clean and Spivak was doing a lot of blocking with his hands out front. And then he fights Greg Hardy and sends him into BKFC. So for Sergey Spivak, obviously, he does have a tidy little record in the UFC. We're talking 5 wins to 3 losses. But for Spivak, obviously one of the bigger marquee fights that he's had in his UFC career. And for Sakai, looking for a reset. And he has tried to reset himself career-wise. In the last 7 weeks, he's moved camp over to American Top Team. You're going to be training with the best of the best. There's always been good heavyweights there. Obviously, JDS was the poster boy there when he was a champion. But we have had a lot of heavyweight fighters out of that camp. So overall, I look at all of this. Don't love Sakai's takedown defense. I love Sergey Spivak's takedowns. Don't love Sergey Spivak's striking all that much. I did in the Oleinik fight, but that was against kind of a non-striker,
50-year-old man.
A club thrower. And for Augusto Sakai, when he throws in combinations and backs his opponents up, when you get back up against the cage, Sakai never stops. He throws great combinations, pretty good cardio for a heavyweight, and he's one of those guys that'll mix in the shots to the body when he's throwing in combination. It's something that you don't see all that often at heavyweight.
We don't even see it all that often with Augusto Sakai is the problem. I agree with you. At his best, I do think he's the better fighter out of these two. If we could go back in time and find sort of the Hall of Fame version of Sergey Spivak and the Hall of Fame version of Augusto Sakai, I genuinely think Sakai is probably the more talented out of the two because of the well-roundedness in his game. And I was someone who was really excited about Augusto Sakai when he came to the UFC. I'll get that out of the way right now. But the issue is, it's been a while since we have seen that guy, and once you get those bad habits into your game plan, they're really, really difficult to iron out, and Sergey Spivak does sort of have the one thing that has always troubled Augusto Sakai. It is a dedicated grappling style, and the thing about Sergey Spivak that at least I like is, he knows what he's good at, he knows what he's not good at. He is going to go for the takedown because he realizes, hey, I have a grappling advantage over a lot of my opponents. I don't think he's going to go in there and play touch ball with Augusto on the feet. I don't think he is going to try to test his striking against the striking of Augusto Sakai, because if he does do that, then Sakai has a much better chance of winning this fight. He's probably the better power puncher. He can put his combinations together a lot better, I would say. But the problem is, if I haven't seen you be that guy in years now, it's really hard for me to believe that all of a sudden you're just going to revert back to your former self. And I know Sakai has only lost to really good fighters. He's been to Tai Tuivasa, who, as of late, has looked phenomenal. It's, like, these are guys who we fully expect Sakai to lose to, almost. Like Jairzinho. I thought Jairzinho was going to beat him. Jairzinho beat the brakes off him. So, for Sakai, maybe it's not that bad that you've been losing to really good fighters, but at a certain point, if you also want to be considered one of the top tier fighters in this division, you have to beat some of these guys or at least be competitive with them. And it has been a while since he's been in a competitive fight against one of the top tier heavyweights.
Yeah, I mean, Marcin Tybura was able to out-grapple Sergey Spivak. And you talk about Spivak's grappling, it is very good. Obviously, Sambo background. You look at it, he was able to take Tuivasa down 6 times, 3 against Jared Vandera, against Carlos Felipe, and Greg Hardy. Enjoy BKFC finished him in the first round of that matchup. So will it be a reset for Augusto Sakai? Will it be a great opportunity to springboard into the rankings for Sergey Spivak? We saw Sergey Pavlovich able to kind of return back to form and start to gain these finish wins. Now all of a sudden, look where he's at in this division. You're talking possible matchup with like Curtis Blades, because that's the only top-tier heavyweight that fights very often. So we'll see how that plays out.
Sergey Pavlovich isn't afraid of the boogeyman under his bed. His nightmare matchup in life is Curtis Blades.
I don't know, Matt, but when we do look at the overall odds here for Sakai, coming in as the underdog, open to plus 170, plus 180 right now. For Sergey Spivak, open to minus 200, minus 225. It's a tricky thing to ask. You look at Sky's last 2 fights, the 2 finished losses, both performance bonuses for his opponents. The Tapology vote, surprise to us, it is to you. Matt, Sergey Spivak's a favorite, and if you asked me 2 years ago if this would have been the case, I'd say no. I bet you the fans have. I'm going to say over under 75% Spivak.
I was thinking around 70 for Spivak, so I'll say lower.
People are going to be down on Augusto.
No harm.
1,113 total votes, 87% Spivak, 25% by decision, 10% by submission, 57% by knockout. He's been training at Extreme Tour the last couple of camps. You love to see it for a guy like that. For the 13% that have Sakai, 51% by decision and 40% by knockout. Listen, Sakai's training at one of the better gyms that can offer him a chance to beat a guy like Sergey Spivak, an American top team. I think 7 weeks plus your camp that you had at your original gym. Great opportunity for him. Can he get the hands going? We've seen Spivak kind of want to strike a little bit against some guys, but when he's dedicated to a game plan, he can work in the takedown. What's your thoughts there?
This is a really tough fight to predict because I think if Spivak can't get the takedown, he's going to be a sitting duck for a lot of the strikes of Sakai. Now, that is going to rely on Sakai reverting back to his former self, but I do think that in this matchup against Sergey Spivak, Sakai's not all that concerned about the power coming back his way because, let's be honest, if you're fighting Jairzinho and Tai Tuivasa, you're probably pretty worried about the punches that are coming back your way, so I do think Sakai will fight in a more natural manner. The issue is, let's say he does start to get aggressive with some of his own strikes, that's going to open up a window for Spivak to time a takedown, get him down, and start to implement his own grappling game. So I don't really like where the odds are, if I'm being completely honest, because I do see this fight much closer to an even, but I will ever so slightly side with Sergey Spivak, because at least the one area that I think he can have success in, I don't think Sakai's going to be able to get back up from his back. So let's say Spivak can get a takedown early in the round, that might even lead to a 10-8 round, if not a finish.
Then it looks bad, just like when Spivak was fighting Greg Hardy, or Marcin Tybura was fighting Greg Hardy. For Augusto Sakai, the get-ups aren't great. The sweeps aren't there. There's not a lot of heavyweights that can sweep off their back
it's
against
like
these...
Doom, and that's it.
Yeah, against these bigger guys. But when I look at it for Augusto Sakai, he is so much better at striking. And Sergey Spivak, much more well-rounded fighter. So how does that pick go for me, Matt? How do I normally pick these fights?
Sergey Spivak, but I feel like you're setting this up to not do what you normally do.
Yeah, I got Augusto Sakai. Just based on that Marcin Tybura matchup, if he starts off fast and he gets his striking going, that's where Sakai can get rolling. So if you can really threaten with your own strikes, with the power at the end of those shots, with that ATT background that he has here recently, I do like Augusto Sakai for those reasons. I love the way that he throws in combination. Neither one of these guys a kicker. For Augusto Sakai, that's a positive in a matchup with Sergey Spivak, because you're not opening your hips up to a big takedown from Spivak. But the same thing you could counter me with is the fact that Sakai has a high boxing stance, and when you're high up like that, it gives the lower body completely open for a guy like Spivak. So no wrong answers here until Saturday. We're split on the pick. I'm going with Brazil's Sergey Spivak. I'm going with Brazil's Augusto Sakai. Matt going with Moldova's Sergey Spivak to get the win. I can't wait for this fight. There's some really good ones on this card. This one is an interesting one. We have the Ultimate Fighter finales. We have Luque versus Neal, and in the main event, Thiago Santos, Jamahal Hill. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Coming up this weekend in our first of 2 Ultimate Fighter 30 finales, somebody's going to win a tournament championship, and both of these fighters, the number 2 overall pick by their respective coaches on the season. We have Team Nunes's Brogan Walker, Brogy the Bear, taking on Killer, hate the nickname, Juliana Miller from Team Pena. And if you do look at it for these 2 women on the season, lots of trials, lots of tribulations. For Miller, I mean, listen, I didn't know what to expect out of her. Now, I say both these women have a lot of experience. It's different kinds of experience. For Walker, 7-2 in MMA. She had 5 fights over with Invicta, a win over Miranda Maverick in 2018. You look at the losses that she does have on her record. 1 to Pearl Gonzalez of UFC fame, 1 to Erin Blanchfield future to be UFC fame. And then the last win is, of course, over Emily King by finish. Emily King from Knoxville Mixed Martial Arts with her husband, Jason. Always fun to talk about that camp. Ovin St. Preux comes from that gym. But when you look at it for Brogan Walker, very much a striker. Tricky southpaw. Throws a lot of power on the end of her hooks that she likes to throw. A good pawing jab. The occasional leg kick from the left stance, but you don't often see her deviate out of southpaw. And when things are in the pocket, Matt, she can really crack in her fights.
She definitely can, and like you said, she has great hand speed, really good power too on the feet. The only thing that I don't love about her game, and you kind of did it while you were making the motion, she almost puts her head up when she's throwing her own power shots. Now, against, regional levels of competition or fighters on The Ultimate Fighter, you're going to be able to get away with that. But that is one of those holes that you do worry about once she makes it to the UFC level, or if she's able to make it to the UFC level, because where she has her most success is also where she might be the most susceptible to getting hit, and that is an interesting area for a fighter to be in. It's like being Marco Polo Reyes. The brawls are great when you're winning them, but the brawls are also bad when you're losing them. So I'll be really interested to see how Walker's technique's going to translate at the next level. But this is the biggest thing that stood out to me, and I can't help but mention this.
Is it that Juliana Miller looks like a grappler striking?
Is she the biggest fighter in this weight division's history?
I mean, listen, you see it numbers on a page, the reach is equal and she's 2 inches taller.
She's
feels so big.
5'7" on Tapology does not do this woman justice.
You know who Juliana Miller reminds me of?
I'd love to hear.
Christina Williams, the warhorse. She's so damn big at 125. Now, for Christina Williams, kickboxing, the discipline, and if you're not a Bellator fan, she had a lot of fun fights over there in the time, but when I look at Juliana Miller, for Brogan Walker, all the success, everything. It's in MMA. She's fought big names. She's fought with Invicta. For Juliana Miller, a lot of grappling. And she went 6-0 as an amateur from 2017 to 2018. Tons and tons of grappling tournaments and championships. She's from 10th Planet, San Diego. 10th Planet, another 125er that trains there.
Alimale McFarlane.
Alimale McFarlane, former Bellator champ. But when you look at it for Juliana Miller, and I say it not jokingly, she very much is a grappler striking. She walks forward, plods forward, Nosferatu, throws a lot of arm punches, keeps her head out on the center line, doesn't really move it a lot, throws a decent kick to close the distance.
She does.
Likes to clinch. Not really great at her takedowns, but the takedown I like out of Juliana Miller is I got the body locked and I trip and I fall on top of my opponent. That's how she was able to end up in a Kimura position, which I thought she was going armbar in that fight, and then all of a sudden she's twisting the arm as she's got the legs around it. So what I learned out of The Ultimate Fighter is that, again, for Brogan Walker, her first fight, it was kind of what it was, I guess, and I hate to say that, but against Hannah Guy, wins a majority decision, drops her in the first round, has a decent second round, but didn't she get her back taken for a large portion of that one? Then she takes on Laura Gallardo, who wasn't even supposed to be on the season. She replaced, and I want to make sure I get it right, Chantel Coates. Coates missed weight early on in the season, the first fight of the season, so in steps Gallardo. Fight starts off all right. Like, I thought Gallardo won the first round, and then I had Walker winning the second round, and then the third round was kind of a toss-up, and so it ends up a Brogan Walker win. I didn't really learn a whole lot about Brogan Walker on the season of The Ultimate Fighter that I didn't know about her kind of going into it. She's a seasoned veteran. She's 33 years old. She's from Guam. She likes to strike. Submission defense is okay. Takedown defense isn't the best.
She just feels like she's always in the same gear. You know, like there's never any urgency to her fighting style. There's never any, oh, I feel really uncomfortable right now. She's just sort of who she is at this stage of her career, and that will be the interesting thing. If you're the Ultimate Fighter winner at 33 years of age, how much more improvement can you make in the UFC? Because you are going to start running out of time.
Oh, you're going to really like the heavyweights, 33 and 34 years old.
Don't worry, I've got a whole thing on that too. It's just, that's the interesting spot that this show is at right now, because everybody likes Contender Series. It's fun. You get a bunch of fights. You don't get any drama. You know, what people like in MMA. And The Ultimate Fighter is sort of the opposite of that exact formula. And it is interesting how, on this card that's supposed to highlight the winners of The Ultimate Fighter, it's being headlined by a Contender Series champion, and the co-main event one half is from the Contender Series. It just feels like they're not really promoting The Ultimate Fighter to its
Bryan
fullest
Battle's
effect.
here on the prelims.
Exactly, but that's the problem. It just really feels like at the top of the card, they're like, hey, these guys are from Contender Series. Look how good Contender Series is. Oh, and by the way, before they fight, check out The Ultimate Fighter Season 30.
But where was The Ultimate Fighter? Oh, It's on ESPN Plus and Fight Pass. Go find it.
It's just, you had brought up earlier about how weird this whole card was. How normally, hey, you have the Ultimate Fighter card on like a Thursday or a Friday. You have a big pay-per-view on the Saturday. That's normally how it's scheduled for a big international fight week. It was strange that the coaches fought before the championship and that they're not using this card more to just promote the Ultimate Fighter as a show.
So if you do watch Miller's fights on the season, of course, again, she was the second overall pick on Team Pena. In her first fight, it's against Claire Guthrie in the first round. All Guthrie. And I mean, they went back and forth, but again, when you watch Juliana Miller fight, it very much is 1-2-1. She does throw a nice jab, and she'll triple up, throw 4-5 jabs in a row to close the distance, but Guthrie did a good job moving out of the range. In the second round, it really was Miller kind of holding things up, and then ultimately it ends up as a decision win for Juliana Miller. Her next one out against Caitlin Neal, beats her by Kimura. It very much was. Neal is a kickboxer, and Miller is a grappler. But when you look at this one, I've even seen on Twitter a lot of support for Juliana Miller. 2-1 the record. Obviously, it doesn't really tell the whole story because she does have such a grappling pedigree, and the fact that she did have a 6-0 amateur career. But again, it's a hard fight to try and predict because the whole season, every fight I watched in The Ultimate Fighter this year, other than the knockouts, were really, really close fights.
They were.
Like, really close
Somewhat
fights.
underwhelming.
So it is tough, but again, I look at this one. Brogan Walker is a better striker, but she can get backed up, and Juliana Miller throws a lock down the middle, but can get hit by hooks. Like, see, it's very hard to try and get one.
Juliana Miller's like Chet Holmgren, and Brandon Walker is like Paulo Banchero. Might be a little bit better right now, but I do feel like Juliana Miller does have the higher ceiling. You're right, she is wonky, but there's something to like about the wonkiness. It is hard to read. She does have very high-level grappling background, so I do feel like Miller, if she is able to make it into the UFC, might be able to make some noise when she's able to get there. A, because she is much younger, so hopefully she'll have more time to improve, but B, I just feel like her game has more that she's going to be able to build upon it, but that's the thing. Paulo might be better than Chet right away, and if she can open up with her boxing combinations, I can see this fight almost looking a lot like Cowboy Cerrone versus Eddie Alvarez. A bit of a deep cut, but still. Cowboy Cerrone is someone who stands very high up with his stance. He likes the clinch, he likes throwing knees up the middle. I know he used the clinch a lot more offensively with his striking than Miller probably will with some takedown attempts, but still, I do think that's going to be a position that both these fighters find themselves in a lot during this fight. And if Walker can fight, almost like Eddie Alvarez did in the clinch against Cowboy, I know he lost the fight, but still, dirty box, make that separation really count, or sorry, make the non-separation really count. So I think Walker can have a really good chance to win this fight, but again, I still feel like Miller is the more eye-catching talent. If either one of these fighters ever go on to make the top 15, there's other fighters like Brogan Walker in the UFC. I think we can say that easily. There's not a lot of fighters, though, who fight in Juliana Miller's style, and I guess that's why I'm still a little bit more curious about what she can become in the future.
She kind of reminds me of Sabina Mazo if you turn down the skills on the feet and you turn up the skills on the ground. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, you make that decision. But you look at the odds in this one, Walker open to minus 160, plus 110. So some value there if you like her already, and maybe you like her as the underdog for Juliana Miller. I guess the opposite can be said. Open a plus 190, a minus 133 or thereabouts. You have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. They're surprised to us as they are to you. They really are. This is a hard one. So Brogan Walker has experience. Open the I'm going to say Miller's been the favorite on Twitter. Over under 65% Miller.
Lower.
You're going to say lower? Slightly. Oh, yeah. Walker's the favorite. 953 total votes. 68% with Walker. 89% by decision. For the 32% that have Miller, 75% by decision. So a lot of people thinking this one's going to go 3 rounds. Both these women have obviously gone 3 rounds in the past. Matt, what's a pick?
Brogan Walker reminds me of a machete, whereas Juliana Miller reminds me of a Swiss Army knife. Machete's really good at one thing, but boy, is it good at that one thing. Whereas for Miller, she's that multi-use tool, you know? She can cut a tree down, take a long time, I guess, with a Swiss Army knife, but you can probably do it. She can uncork a wine bottle. There's other things that you can do if you're Juliana Miller. The thing is, though, I do think Walker's going to be able to make her pay for some of those power shots in the feet, where Miller, unless she is able to get the finish, I think it's going to be really hard for her to win moments in this fight. Again, her jab's good, but I don't know if there's anything or enough behind it to really get Brogan's respect other than that prodding jab. So I'm ever so slightly going to pick Walker, but I think this will be a fun fight.
To me, I like Juliana Miller in this matchup. I think she throws more volume than Brogan Walker, and that's the thing. Walker does this great thing when you walk in on her. She does tend to throw a lot of really good counters. Like you said, she will throw a flurry of hooks, and when she lands, you're dropping Hannah Guy. But the flip side of that is you drop hand a guy in the first round, she's still there in the second round, and then you have your back taken for minutes on end in the round. For Juliana Miller, the takedown attempts, they're not traditional. That could ultimately help her in a matchup like this. It's easier to get a body lock trip takedown against somebody that's closer to your own height. And when it comes to this matchup, she does have a bit of a height advantage, but I like Juliana Miller. I like Swiss Army knife fighters more often than I do the one that has that one punch knock him out, drag him out style. And for Brogan Walker, she has that knockdown against Guy that I did like in that fight, but she's not a big power puncher, and she does have a lot of wins by decision, which is easier said than done.
She's the more heavy-handed, though, without a doubt.
That's 100%. And for Juliana Miller, like I said, she very much is a grappler who strikes. So we'll see how it pans out. The Ultimate Fighter Season 30 Women's Flyweight Tournament Championship. That's a mouthful. On the line, Matt going with Brogan Walker. And I've got Juliana Miller to get the win. Change the nickname when you win. Just go like Ultimate Fighter winner Miller.
You were fine with Pantoja being the cannibal. Why do you dislike Killer Miller?
I mean, listen, he doesn't have to do it to eat it, you know? It's different.
She's not a killer, she's just a Miller.
Well, that's the nickname. I don't know. I'm a stickler for nicknames, but we disagree on the pick. We have the heavyweight finale between Zach Pauga taking on Muhammad Usman, former Arizona football player. And then in the co-main, Vicente Luque, Jeff Neal, main event, Thiago Santos taking on Jamahal Hill. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.
The Ultimate Fighter Season 28 Heavy Hitters featured the winner from the Canary Islands. His name's Juan Espino, one of my favorite heavyweights to watch. The Ultimate Fighter Season 30 featured a heavyweight from Canada that hadn't won a fight since 2009 and was also 43 years old. And also these guys. We have Zach Pauga. The nickname's the Ripper. He's taking on the Motor. He's not from Detroit. It's Muhammad Usman, a guy who was a defensive lineman with Arizona. He was a 2-star recruit when I read about him at the University of Houston.
Makes sense. He is built like a brick shithouse.
But when you watch Muhammad Usman, very entertaining fighter. Now, I say this, he's the younger brother of Kamaru Usman. You might go, younger brother? Kamaru's a young guy. No, Kamaru's 35. Muhammad's 33. And if you look at it for Zach Pauga, he's 34. These guys are older heavyweights making their way downtown, getting a chance in the UFC. And listen, obviously heavyweights age differently. These guys both don't have extensive records. And for Zach Pauga, he started MMA as an amateur at the age of 30. So if you still have a dream out there, maybe you could do it. Now, he was like a heavyweight through his amateur days, undefeated, became a light heavyweight as a pro. He's not a big heavyweight, like he's like 230, 240. Muhammad Usman started off as a big heavyweight, and he slimmed down as he's gone on the show. It's kind of weird.
And it's not like he slimmed down with fat. Like, he has kind of lost muscle. He almost doesn't really look like the same guy at this stage of his career. It has made him a different fighter than the one that you might remember coming from the PFL, because physically, they don't really look that similar at all. And it has been a big transformation for Usman to get down. Now, I say get down to this size. The guy's 6'2" and weighs 240 pounds. But again, if you go back and watch some of his earlier fights, he did weigh in at basically the heavyweight limit, so it will be interesting to see how that does affect him and his movement at this weight class, because he is somebody who, even at his highest, he kind of fights like a guy who did other sports growing up. Like, Greg Hardy got decent at MMA basics because he is a really good athlete. Like, I don't care what your personal feelings are about Greg Hardy. If you play in the NFL, you are an extremely athletic human being. Muhammad Usman is also an extremely athletic human being. But when you do have a background in another sport, when you've been focusing on trying to make a career in another sport, well, Fabricio Verdum never tried to be in the NFL. You know what he did? Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai until he became the heavyweight champion. So for Usman, you look at him and he is 33 years of age. It feels like his skill set belongs to a 24-year-old, though. Like, it feels like his skill set belongs to somebody who did have 10 fights in the regional scene. And now they're coming up with the Ultimate Fighter, so I'm very curious to see what adjustments Usman can make. Because I do like what you said, and it does make me kind of rethink this fight a little bit. In the heavyweight division, neither one of these guys are old by any means, but for Usman, at a certain point, I'm going to have to see some type of an evolution in his game.
And I didn't see much for either guy that I didn't see on the regional scene. And I watched a lot of regional tape, and then I just watched the Ultimate Fighter fights. And listen, when you had Usman against Michael Sipe, in that fight, Sipe had his name tattooed on his back. And he's, like, egging Usman on the whole fight. That's why he lost that fight. I know it's a unanimous decision. The only reason he lost is because he fought like an idiot. And Nunes was giving it to him. All the coaches were. But he'd, like, egg him on, and Usman drops him in the first round. And then the second round goes, and he's, like, still egging him on. Like, what are you doing, man? So Usman's able to get it done. He's a guy that fights behind, like, one jab and an overhand right. And that's it. Like, he'll throw the occasional leg kick, but it's a lot of single shots. And Pauga does kind of the same thing, and both of these guys, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, come out of bigger camps. For Muhammad Usman, it's Fortis MMA. For Zach Pauga, it's out of Elevation Fight Team. So both guys getting the opportunity to train with good coaches and good training partners. And when I look at it, the fight against Eduardo Perez for Usman was the advancing party that tended to land more shots. And that was pretty much the story of that fight. I know it's a split decision win, but that's what I gathered from it. If you look at the rest of the Usman fights from the regional scene, I went back and watched this fight against Don'Tale Mayes. Usman tried to wrestle Mayes, and he had success there. And when it was at distance, Mayes landed combinations. When he fought Frank Tate, he did relatively the same thing. Garcia knocks out. Reggie Cato, he just closed the distance, throws a right hand, and ends up hurting him. And against Brandon Sales, he was on the channel here, did an interview, and then he caught the Fight Night Picks curse, and he ended up losing to Brandon Sales, who was supposed to fight Greg Hardy on Dana White's Contender Series, but it fell out. But when I look at Usman, a lot of single shots. When I look at Zach Pauga, I expected, okay, the guy, young in his career, young in his MMA career, he's coming out of a bigger gym, he fought a decent level of competition, he beat Maluko, so that's fun, beat him over at Cage Warriors 130, so I watched the fight, and I went, okay, you beat Marcus Perez, that's really good. Marcus Perez missed weight by, 4.5 pounds? He weighed 210.5. And in that fight, Perez wins the first round handily, completely out-wrestles Zach Pauga. Second round, it's kind of 50-50. Third round, Perez doesn't really have a whole lot left. Pauga is the fresher fighter. Pauga's fight against Bartling on The Ultimate Fighter. A lot of single shots, a lot of jab to the body, come up with a right leg kick, and then his fight against Heiderman, pretty well the same thing until he lands and finishes him.
But what I do like out of Pauga is that at least his shots are straight. There is something on the in-between when it's not just a knockout. So that is one thing he has going for him. The one positive I will give Muhammad Usman is he moves extremely well for a guy his size. Like, his footwork on the feet, it might not be dynamic in a sense like Max Holloway where you're trying to circle your opponent and get the edge on them that way, but just his left to right and even backing up, he's a lot faster than the majority of heavyweights at this stage. So if he does get in trouble on the feet, I do feel like his athleticism and his movement is going to be able to help him at least work through some of those bad positions. But that is the big thing that stood out to me between these two athletes, is the movement of Usman, to where maybe he can use some of his movement to make Zach walk into a big shot, but for Pauga, I really do like his jab to the body. I do like some of those steadying shots. They're not necessarily the most damaging shots in the world, but they're things that are going to get your numbers up, which do matter. They're going to resonate in the eyes of the judges, which does matter. And they're going to set up your own power shots, which is going to be very important for this fight. Because if Usman does just try to use his footwork and his overhand right, he's probably going to be whiffing at air quite a bit. Now, if one of those shots lands, it is probably going to be over. This guy does have incredible power when he is able to land his shots, but the problem is, it's like Deontay Wilder earlier on in his boxing career. He had a great right hand, but he wasn't good at landing it. He didn't really have a jab, didn't have a left hook or anything around it. Muhammad Usman just has that right hand right now, and he's going to have to build other parts of his game to help accentuate that one weapon.
The thing that weirds me out about this one, if you look at Zach Pauga, and Forrest Griffin even said it in one of his fights on Contender Series, he was like, wow, that's a good finish. It was his last one. He's like, that's a good finish. This guy normally fights to a decision. And if you look at Zach Pauga fights, if every fight was 15 rounds, he'd knock guys out in like the 14th round. He'd just tire them out because Pauga actually does move well on the outside. He gets backed up a lot. He gets held up against the cage. He doesn't have great takedown defense. Whereas Muhammad Usman, when he finishes his fights, it's usually earlier on in those fights. So it is an interesting matchup. I thought, numbers on a page, stats-wise, I take Pauga 9 times out of 10. I'm not really there anymore. So if I do look at the odds, Pauga open to minus 200, minus 238 right now. For Muhammad Usman, open plus 170, around a plus 200. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise test there to you. I'm going to say if Pauga's that big of a favorite, I'll say over under 70%.
I'll say over.
Though again, there's the Usman name. It is over. So 983 total votes, 80% Pauga, 69% by decision, 22% by knockout. For the 20% that have Usman, 45% by decision, 42% by knockout. You seem to have tipped your hand earlier, but I'm eager to see, are you going with Zach Pauga to win this fight?
Do you know what my big issue is with Muhammad Usman being on The Ultimate Fighter?
I have a big issue with everybody this season.
Why are they making the brother of the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world fighting on The Ultimate Fighter? Ayman Zahabi just got to fight in the UFC because he's related to Faraz Zahabi. My point is, if you are this top-tier prospect or the
Coming
UFC...
off a loss, that's it.
But still, if you're... people have fought for titles coming off losses, so I'm not too concerned about that. If you are this good of a fighter, and you do have the relationship with your brother, and that's something that the UFC can promote, they normally wouldn't make you fight on a reality TV show to then prove that you belong to be in the organization. If the UFC doesn't even believe in Muhammad Usman to give him the opportunity out the gate, I have a hard time picking him to actually make it to that level. I think the winner of this fight is going to have a tough time at the UFC level, just because Zach Pauga is a small heavyweight, and Muhammad Usman is a big athletic heavyweight who relies almost too much on his own athleticism to then grow in just sort of a skill capacity. So I am ever so slightly going to pick Pauga, but I gotta be honest, I was really excited about Ricky Tercios, for instance, coming off last season. I know he hasn't necessarily worked out, but still, the hype was there at least going into the finale. I can't say I feel that kind of excitement or hype for either one of these athletes.
Yeah, I don't watch The Ultimate Fighter as it's going on. I'm not a big TV guy, let alone reality TV guy, and so you're really gonna have a hard time getting me involved in the show. So forget about the drama, forget about the storylines. He got here on his own volition, winning those 2 fights on the Ultimate Fighter, so we end up in this finale, and I think Muhammad Usman has a wrestling advantage. So for that reason, I'm gonna pick him to beat Zach Pauga. But both of these guys are low volume heavyweights, the worst kind of heavyweights. The worst result. This fight wouldn't even be on Dana White's Contender Series. They wouldn't
get a contract.
Mick Maynard and Hunter Campbell wouldn't just sign him up because they know what's going to happen. It's not going to be the greatest of fights. So, listen, fool me once, can't get fooled again. I've got Muhammad Usman as an underdog in this one. Matt going with Zach Pauga, the Ripper. Let us know who you have in this matchup. I'm really eager because there's some diehard Ultimate Fighter fans out there, and they hit up the comment section. I want to hear from them. Who do you have in this matchup? Jeff Neal's taking on Vicente Luque next in the co-main event. Thiago Santos, Jamahal Hill in the main event. It should be a great one. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Big time co-main event coming up this weekend. Ranked fighters. Now, Jeff Neal slid to 13th in the rankings, but he did pick up a big win his last time out. He's taking on Vicente Luque, and the opposite cannot be said for Vicente. Definitely didn't have his best performances last time out, where Bilal Muhammad just ran a train on him. I mean, just became a Brill Bruiser, like the album by the New Pornographers. Great song on that vinyl. Canadian band. But when it does come down to this matchup, for both of these guys, Jeff Neal, great striker, great boxer, very reserved. When he gets his opponents hurt, he knows exactly what to do. And if you look at Jeff Neal, he did have a hard time figuring out Neil Magny, did have a hard time against Wonderboy. Before that, big wins, but that was the thing. He finished Mike Perry, and then there was that long layoff, and Jeff Neal had a really rough patch in his career, in his life. He had to kind of figure things out, pick the pieces back up, and then lose 2 straight to get where he's at right now. And Jeff Neal, I don't know if the best days are behind him. I don't know if the best days are yet to come. I guess the same thing could be said for Vicente Luque, who is, of course, ranked higher. But when you stack these two guys up, for Luque, 4 Fight of the Night bonuses, 4 performance bonuses. For Jeff Neal, he does have 1 performance bonus to his credit over Nico Price. Nico Price, a combined 0-3 against these guys, so probably don't watch this fight, but you know he will.
Oh, yeah.
You know he's somewhere in Florida watching this one in a basement, just getting amped and jacked, and he wants to fight again. When I do look at this one, it's an interesting fight. It's 2 top guys at 170, and I like the matchmaking in this fight.
And it still feels like they both need a win, because for Jeff Neal, he looked good against Ponzinibbio, but he didn't look great, if we're being honest. It was a really close fight between those two guys, and Neal didn't show us anything we didn't already know about him, and that's the one thing that might point to he hasn't improved that much since his long layoff before the Wonderboy fight. He had heart failure at one point, like he had some very serious injuries right before the Wonderboy fight, and that was a really bad performance if we're just being honest. Like, Wonderboy had him rocked on multiple occasions. He could never really corner Wonderboy into one side of the cage to really let go with his own offense, and that won't be a problem for him at all against Vicente Luque, who loves nothing more than just getting into wildfire fights. But the way that I think about this fight is a lot like I thought about Rafael Alves versus Drew Dober and last weekend's card. We had that as a fight of the night, and we have this on the fight of the night screen too. If this does happen to become one of those fight of the night style fights, then it heavily favors Vicente Luque, because Luque not only has been in those types of fights before, but he tends to excel when he's eating a big shot and giving a big shot for his troubles, whereas Jeff Neal likes to get in and get out and be very clean while he does it. Think about the knockout when he had over Mike Perry. Hits him with a straight left hand, a head kick, and it's basically over from that point on. We've talked about it for a long time, about how Geoff Neal's one of the best, like, shark in the water when he smells blood type of fighters. He doesn't overexert himself when he goes for a finish. He picks his shots very intelligently, and he's really accurate, too, with his power shots, which is something that you can't say enough about, because we see a lot of fighters in a lot of divisions just throw punches and throw at air 99% of the time. Geoff Neal makes his shots count, which is always something I've really enjoyed watching his fighting style. But in this fight against Luque, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, where does Geoff Neal have the most success at? Because he really likes that kicking range, especially with his own boxing. He has long-range boxing attacks. He likes that head kick with his left leg. The problem is, if Geoff Neal does stand in kicking range with Vicente Luque, Luque is one of the best leg kickers in the UFC. I know a lot of the times you think about like Justin Gaethje, you think about Edson Barbosa, but Luque is right up there with the best of them. So if Luque is able to chop down at the legs of Geoff Neal, make him a little bit more stationary, take away some of that kicking offense, I don't know how much I like just the pure boxing of Geoff Neal against the boxing of a guy like Vicente Luque.
When you try and break this one down for Vicente Luque, how do you beat him? You rock him, you finish him.
Wrestle him.
You wrestle him, you wrestle him, you wrestle him. I've got 10 fingers, luckily, and out of all of those 10, one of them is going to be, okay, you beat him in the striking. The rest is you out-wrestle him, and you don't get stuck in a choke that he's going to throw your way. And I mean, obviously we saw Bilal Muhammad do that, but that's not a big part of Geoff Neal's game. It's defend the takedown so I can continue to strike, and Geoff Neal's very good at that. But when it comes to a pure striking matchup, we've been talking about it the whole card. Swiss Army knife out of Vicente Luque. Obviously for Geoff Neal, he's had fights where the threat of the kick's been a big thing for him. The Mike Perry fight is a great example of that. But when I look down at this one, I mean, for Vicente Luque, that main event against Bilal Muhammad was just over 3 months ago. The last fight for Geoff Neal, about 7, was a split decision win over Ponzinibbio. Whether you saw it for Ponzinibbio or Neal, that's neither here nor there when it
really
enters into this fight. When you look at the odds, Luque open to minus 175, minus 180 for Geoff Neal, open to plus 150, plus 145, somewhere around there, plus 155. We have a look at the Topology votes, Matt. Surprise us there to you. I'm going to say over under 75% Luque.
I think they'll be over.
And they're way over. 1,153 total votes, 91% Luque, 51% by decision, 22% by submission, 20% by knockout. For the 9% that have Neal, 70% by decision. If we made this video 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, this would be like a 15-minute video and we wouldn't shut up about it and people would get upset.
I mean, I still have a lot to say if you want to make it that long.
I don't really think I need to. I mean, I don't know if Geoff Neal's improved a whole heck of a lot, and I haven't seen it from him in a few years now. That's my trouble.
And the other thing is, Luque is one of the best offensive grapplers with his submissions in the division. Like, yeah, he can get out-wrestled by some guys, but look at who he got out-wrestled by. Michael Chiesa, before he submitted him. Leon Edwards, a guy fighting for the title right now. Like, these are and Bilal Muhammad, one of the best pure wrestlers in the division. Geoff Neal's going to make this fight very exciting, but let's think about the trajectory of a lot of fighters just getting in the top 15. It's okay. We finally broke into the top 15. You gotta win 5 or 6 fights normally, just be able to do that. Then we start to see how well you do against ranked competition. For Geoff Neal, he did start to lose basically immediately once he started fighting those ranked fighters, and he has had a lot of trouble with fighters in their prime, whereas Vicente Luque made it pretty far into the top 15 before he ever faced any adversity. Now, yes, his fights were always tough. He's always going to eat some big power shots, but for the most part, Luque was able to handle these guys who we consider elite in this division before he faced up against a stylistic nightmare in Bilal Muhammad, a guy who can box them a little bit on the outside because of his incredible volume. And then we all know what's going to happen the second Luque tries to plant and land his own power shots. Bilal Muhammad's going to duck under and shoot his own takedown. So I think Geoff Neal has the ability to make this fight extremely fun. Probably get to a decision, make this a fight of the night where both guys might even get dropped. The problem is, after that one big storm that Geoff Neal brings, I don't really know what he has to offer after that. I know he is a good fighter after that one point, but again, it's that big storm, and then it's a lot of pitter-patter, a lot of single shots in the back foot, whereas with Luque, the storm never ends. Like, the second he gets on the inside, he's going to eat your best shot. He's going to try to respond with his best shot.
And for Saud, between rounds, you have to expect he's going to get fired up. It's not a 5-round fight, so, you know, less opportunity for that. But for Geoff Neal, once he starts to follow you around the cage instead of cutting the cage with his footwork, and his footwork's good, but after a while, it kind of falls off a little bit. Once he's chasing you, obviously, Wonder Boy, one of the greatest tacticians in the division, he just chased him and kept eating shots for his trouble. When you're chasing a guy like Vicente Luque, that's when the straight shots start to loop and you get hit by a big one. So I look at the overall skill set. I like Vicente Luque in this matchup. I honestly kind of halfway surprised with myself that I don't have more to say about it, but I look at it as the upper levels of competition in this division. Luque's excelled against them. More complete skill set. I go with Luque here.
But how good is the welterweight division right now? Like, we have what? The number 7 and the number 14. In some divisions, that's going to make a boring fight. I can't guarantee you much in life. Vicente Luque versus Jeff Neal is going to be an awesome fight. Like, I am looking forward to this more than the main event, if I'm being completely honest, because I think Luque and Neal both still have another run in the rankings in them. You know, I don't think this is going to be it, even for the loser. I really do think that they're going to have a lot of competitive fights with a lot of great fighters from this point out. And the good thing about the welterweight division, last point, is I don't care if you're ranked 25th to 15th in the division. You're going to have a bunch of fun fights. You're going to fight guys like Li Jingliang, guys like Randy Brown, like top tier fighters who we can all get excited for. So I think this will be an incredible fight, but I agree with you. I have the silent assassin.
And I mean, what if the UFC decided, because this is such a good division, let's headline a pay-per-view with Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz? Because they did that. So get excited for that one and that pay-per-view. Ugh. Both of us going with Vicente Luque to get the wheel. Yikes, the win over Jeff Neal, putting it all together. We have a big-time main event coming up this weekend. Thiago Santos taking on Sweet Dreams Are Made of These, Jamahal Hill. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. Main event of UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Hill. We have Maheta, Thiago Santos taking on Sweet Dreams, Jamahal Hill. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, as always, Matt Allen on the respective socials. And coming up this weekend, we have the former title challenger, the former middleweight, Thiago Santos, a guy who came in on The Ultimate Fighter Brazil Season 2, and he's taking on Dana White's Contender Series own Sweet Dreams, Jamahal Hill, a guy who has one lone loss in the UFC to Paul Craig, where he thought he could play jiu-jitsu on the ground with him, and it didn't work. But if you look at it for Jamahal Hill, it has been an impressive run in the UFC. Now, there has been, the highs have been high, I guess, if you consider his last one over Johnny Walker. That was a big one. It was a main event of a fight night. He beat Jimmy Crute by finish. He beat Ovince St. Preux by finish. He beat Klidson Abreu by finish, but that one was overturned to a no contest. But if you do look at it for Jamahal Hill, this guy is one of the more imposing southpaw strikers that we've had in this division since, the guy that he beat, Ovince St. Preux. And that guy was a former title challenger at UFC 197. So you do look at this matchup as Jamahal Hill, a guy that cross-trains at a few different gyms, a guy who has a wicked Instagram game where he's doing the fighter intros with, is it Tate? Is that the cut man? So good for Jamahal Hill. I can't wait to see how the weight cut goes, but good for Jamahal Hill, and I'm really eager to see this matchup because for Hill, Johnny Walker is one beast, and obviously Thiago Santos fought Johnny Walker not that long ago.
Not great fight.
It was a close, not great main event. He gets the win 9 months and 3 weeks ago. But you look at the fights since John Jones. Lose to John Jones 3 years ago. Lose to Glover Teixeira by submission. Knock him out, drag him out. Start that fight until Thiago can't knock him out and Glover storms back like a banshee. Lose to Alexander Rakic where he gets kind of grounded out. And then his last time out, lose to Magomed Ankalaev where he dropped him in the second round. Lost the first round, the third round, the fourth round, the fifth round of that main event. So Thiago Santos has been in a lot of main events. The one telling thing is that the UFC's big promo highlight reel fight for Thiago Santos they put on their YouTube channel Monday night was his fight against Anthony Smith. And Anthony Smith just lost to Magomed Ankalaev, so I guess some recency there, but that's a middleweight fight. So it's odd that they didn't include a highlight reel at 205, like his fight with Jimmy Manoa.
What I keep on going back to is the fact that we harped a lot on Thiago Santos' knees post John Jones. It did seem like for a little while they were getting better. Like he was becoming the fighter that he was pre-ACL injuries. It's like this happens in basketball all the time. Kyle Terry's ACL won't be good that first season they come back. They'll kind of look like the same player. But then the second year, the third year after, they'll pretty much look like the person they were pre-injuries. The problem with Thiago Santos is, and I think about a lot like Douglas Lima with this problem too. Douglas Lima reached MMA IQ sainthood, if you will, once his body started to fail him because he was a little bit older in his career. The two never really matched up at the perfect time. With Santos, I might not be worried about his knees anymore, but at 38 years of old, Father Time's out there just thinking one of these nights he's the Eagles. Ooh, in between the dark and the light. For Santos, I might not be worried about the knees as much, But I'm worried about the amount of crazy fights he's been in at this stage of his career. I am still worried about the knees, if we're being honest. And the fact that you have a guy who used to fight at middleweight, like you said, now fighting one of the biggest light heavyweights we have on roster. Because that's the other thing I kept on going back to. Remember how big OSP looked when he fought Ben Rothwell? He looked like a full-fledged heavyweight. Now, I know that was not the best fight ever, but still, you had Ben Rothwell, a guy who is known for being big Ben Rothwell, like a massive heavyweight, and OSP matched up physically with him, basically to a T at that division. Jamahal Hill looked bigger than OSP when they fought each other at light heavyweight, and I know OSP has to cut weight to get to 205, but you get the idea. His frame is big enough to be a heavyweight fighter, and I'm talking about Jamahal Hill right now, and he's fighting a guy who used to fight at middleweight, now has knee issues, and I know Thiago Santos, I'm not completely doing it justice, Thiago Santos was as big of a middleweight as you could possibly be, and honestly, his chin kind of did suffer by the weight cuts going down to middleweight, so of course we've seen a better version at 205, but when these guys face off, I'm very used to seeing Thiago Santos look like a light heavyweight and match up physically with his opponents. Walker was taller than him, Rakic was taller than him, but physically he matched up with all of them. I think Jamahal Hill's going to look meaningfully bigger than Thiago Santos come fight night, to where it's going to look like they are weight classes apart.
I'm eager to see what we get out of Santos, because I can harp on all these losses, and I can pick out some of the really good wins. It was a fight of the night against Erick Anders. He gets the win right at the end. It was a great finish that he had over Anthony Smith back in 2018. The fight he has against Jan Blachowicz, he has all those big explosions, and that's how he's able to win that. Just rushing across, finishing him right straight up through the middle. If you look at it for Thiago Santos out of the wins, there's always that one big movement that gets him that finish or gets him the win or wins him those moments. I mean, the Kevin Holland fight, he did out-wrestle.
Checker Mason one where he just ran across and spammed up.
Yeah, exactly. Or the one against Jimmy Manuwa. He's pushing him all the way back up, finishing him. He has that one big burst against Magomed Ankalaev, drops him, round ends, and then that's kind of it. It's just like a holding pattern. Like, you look at some of these fights, has a couple against Glover Teixeira, but then he ends up getting finished. I don't know. I mean, listen, Thiago Santos is always going to have those one or two big bursts in his fights. Can Jamahal Hill figure him out before then? Or can he time it to where he gets the counter? And that's a really tough ask.
It is a tough ask, because for Santos, this is the problem with his punching power. I know he dropped Ankalaev, but Johnny Walker is not thought of as the most durable man in the world. And yes, he beat him by landing some long-distance power punches, but he didn't land a lot of clean shots in that fight. And I know, as a middleweight, he's going to struggle against punching taller guys in this weight class. And again, Jamahal Hill's not as big as Johnny Walker, but still, you're going to be punching up at a guy constantly throughout this fight. And I already don't love Thiago Santos' cardio throughout 5 rounds. Again, don't love the knee injuries, don't love the age at this point of his career. This really does feel like it's a fight to get Jamahal Hill into the top 5 of the division, if I'm being honest. And we have seen this a lot in a lot of divisions as of late. Like, lightweight right now has Demiris Magulov, Mateusz Gamrot, Arman Tsarukyan, that, like, let's be honest, they're probably going to wreak havoc on a lot of the old guard in that division, and we're going to see a lot of the more established names kind of get beat out of the rankings. I feel like this is sort of a microcosm of what that is, but in the light heavyweight division. Jamahal Hill, other than one slip-up against Paul Craig, to where, to our credit, we did say a bunch before that fight, Jamahal Hill's way better, but also, he's been talking a lot about how good his jiu-jitsu is, and Paul Craig's probably not the opponent you want tested against, but I don't know what the one niche area of Jamahal Hill's game is that Thiago Santos can take advantage of, because at kicking range for Santos, it's basically punching range for Jamahal Hill. Punching range for Santos is going to be the sweet spot for Jamahal Hill, and Hill hasn't shown a poor chin by any means up until this stage of his career. So, I love watching Maheta fight, don't get me wrong. It's super fun, it's always enjoyable. I just don't know what his area, or what his wrinkle is that he brings to this fight that's really going to help him get the finish.
I mean, Hill's a pretty big favorite in this one. Open minus 250, minus 280 or thereabouts. For Thiago Santos, open plus 220. Plus 225, we have a look rather than at the Tapology votes. We throw these ones out in the main event. Over in the YouTube community tab, if you're subscribed, it's easy to find. If you're not, you can find it too. 1,900 total votes, 82% Jamahal Hill. And in the comments section, it's usually the same crew, but Bob saying, I don't think it's necessarily fair to say Santos has not looked the same or been aggressive. He was ridiculously explosive against Glover and almost finished him twice. Perhaps he respected Walker, Rakic, and Ankalaev striking more.
The only pushback I'd give there is, I doubt he's watched the entirety of Glover's career and did the same with Johnny Walker and thought to himself, well, Johnny's probably more dangerous.
Well, Mike says, I have Jamahal Hill by decision. Santos is still durable, dangerous, defensively minded, so knocking him out always proves difficult. But he rarely makes adjustments during a fight, and he has low volume, so it's unlikely he beats many guys by decision. Hill will pressure Santos early before feeling some of Santos' power, and so on. We have Tyler saying really tough for me, leaning Santos by decision, but
Nice
not
to see a
confident.
Santos pick.
We have Henzo saying Santos hasn't really been the same since the surgery post-Jones. Kind of. And I'll give you one more. AJO saying Luque and Hill is what you're going with. Luque and Hill, co-main event, main event. So Matt, the fans, a large majority of them going with Jamahal Hill. They're going with the new fighter, the shiny new toy. I think Thiago Santos in his striking arsenal might have a little bit more, but the sneaky thing out of Jamahal Hill from that southpaw stance, we talk about his boxing. He does have pretty damn good kicks, too.
Exactly. So let's say he starts going at the knees of Thiago, landing leg kicks, making a guy who relies on his movement, let's be honest, even more stationary. Again, you have a big power puncher, and I mean a massive power puncher for this weight division, fighting a guy who might be a little bit more technical, might be a little bit faster, but I just don't know if those two game plans are going to be sustainable enough for Thiago Santos to avoid that big shot the whole entire fight. Again, 25 minutes for Jamahal Hill is a big deal, so I'm very curious to see him in this atmosphere, because let's say he wins this fight but doesn't look good. Maybe I don't think he will fight for a title one day, because I'm going to be completely honest. I said it on the pay-per-view, I said on Question Mark Kicks last weekend, I think Jamahal Hill is going to fight for the title at some point in his UFC career. Might not be the next fight, might not be next year, but I really do think he has the type of skill set that can get him up to that title shot, and this fight against Thiago Santos, let's say he finishes him in the 4th round, looks really good up until then, I'll feel a lot more confident in that prediction, but I do have Hill so far in this fight.
Yeah, I agree with you. Going with Jamahal Hill in this matchup, we also have the Ultimate Fighter Season 30 finale. You got Zach Pauga taking on Muhammad Usman. You got Juliana Miller taking on Brogan Brogy the Bear Walker.
Will Pena Nunes be in attendance? Is that going to be an awkward, like, across the cage stare they're giving each other?
Let's fight for the belt tomorrow. Amanda Nunes says yes to that one. I don't know. It really is weird. It's an interesting card. Former Ultimate Fighter winner Bryan battles on the undercard, taking on Takashi Sato. Really interesting fight kicking off the card that nobody's going to talk about. Mayra Bueno Silva taking on Stephanie Egger. There's a lot buried in this one. You just have to kind of dig through it and sift through. So if it's card for you, you let us know down below in the comments section. Make your picks, what you like about the show, what you don't. You let us know down there. Matt, big week. You excited?
I'm very excited.
Always excited. Question Mark Kicks live 2 hours before the prelims as well, coming up this weekend. And if you're not checking them out, our Dana White's Contender Series breakdowns are also here. One pick a piece and they count. So check those out as well. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.